July 1960. While flying over a remote section of northern Canada, a Canadian aircraft patrol pilot suddenly encountered the huge shape of a strange, unknown giant. But what was it? And where did it come from? Now comes a motion picture that explores this incredible mystery. Don't miss Sasquatch.
Welcome to the Cinematic Void Podcast. Cinematic Void is a cult film series that hosts screenings in the Los Angeles area as well as virtually. I'm your host, Jim Branscombe, and joining me as always is...
Hey, it's Nick Vance, Paranoid Futures on all social media. You can find Cinematic Void on the World Wide Web at cinematicvoid.com, as well as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and all major podcast platforms. If you want to support The Void, you can consider joining our Patreon. Not only do you get cool perks, but you make this podcast as well as the Cinemadness movie possible. All right, Jim, what are we getting into today?
Well, Nick, we're going on a search for one of the most beloved cryptids that ever was put on film, and that, of course, is Bigfoot. We have two special guests on this episode. Joining us first will be Pamula Pierce Barcelou, the president of Boggy Creek, and the daughter of Charles B. Pierce, who helmed the Bigfoot movie that started all, The Legend of Boggy Creek. Then we will be chatting up one of our longtime friends and Sasquatch expert, Bruce Holecheck from Cinema Arcana, about some of his favorite Bigfoot movies. Before we go chasing after skunk apes, I want to do a little housekeeping, just kind of get these things out of the way. I'll be at Crypticon Seattle Friday, August 27th through 29th, where I'll be debuting the live version of the Cinemadness movie. If you want to come check that out, that will be on Friday night. And then on Saturday, I'll be moderating a really cool panel, which can't really talk about yet because it hasn't been announced, but really excited to do this panel. It's some heavy hitters involved. Lastly, we've been gearing up for a big fall on the Cinematic Void podcast. I just wrapped up the last interview for our Salem, Massachusetts episode that I'm really excited to share. It'll feature Kay Lynch of Salem Horror Fest, Rachel Christ from the Salem Witch Museum, James Lorgio, the owner of Count Orlok's Nightmare Gallery, and Derek Millen, creator of Detours, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels. Plus, we'll have clips from my Hocus Pocus and Lords of Salem Q&As I conducted back in 2018. And Nick and I also recently completed an epic career-spanning interview with Kayla Janice, the author of House of Psychotic Women and the director of Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. And of course, the Cinemadness movie will keep on rolling as well with a brand new episode on August 13th, presented by our friends at Culture Shock Releasing. With that said, let's take a little break, and then we're going to go hunt some Sasquatch on the Cinematic Void Podcast.
If a pizza with 3 toppings costs $10.99, what would I pay for 6 toppings? Well, $10.99. The reason is Bigfoot!
It's the Bigfoot Big 6 Pizza. Get our special 6 toppings for the 3-topping price of $10.99.
Are you sure you're the Pizza Hut guy?
Bigfoot from Pizza Hut, a legendary value.
Joining us now is the president of Boggy Creek and also the daughter of the director of Legend of Boggy Creek, Charles B. Pierce. Please welcome to The Void, Pamula Pierce Barcelou. Pamela, how are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me onto your show.
You're welcome. My first question before we get into the film itself, can you tell me a little bit about the actual legend behind the Fook monster?
Yeah, sure. So the Legend of Boggy Creek is based on a true story. In 1972, when it was released as a documentary. For years before, there had been sightings. It's actually pronounced Falk. Falk is about 12 miles from Texarkana. For quite a while, there had been reports. And then in 1971, there were a group, like kind of a cluster of sightings, and it actually garnered, I believe, international attention. It definitely was nationally. And so all of these different news groups came down and they were interviewing. And so that's the Ford, when the Ford incident occurs and Bobby Ford is attacked and goes to the hospital, it was like almost mass hysteria in that area. And so later on, my dad has decided then by this point that he wants to make a movie, but he's working on a kind of mountain man adventure, which later on he did a lot of those. But so he was working on that as his first movie. It was actually called Bright River. And he and Earl Smith, the writer, were in Los Angeles doing some pre-production work. And later on, Earl and my dad actually wrote Sudden Impact, Go Ahead, Make My Day. But this is their first excursion. They're doing their pre-production work, driving down Sunset. They see these kids, teenagers, wearing Falk Monster t-shirts. So my dad says, you got to pull over, like pull up. So he jumps out and he's talking to him. Now, I actually read this in Variety magazine or Hollywood Reporter, something that was released in like 72. My dad's talking about this. So he says in the interview, by the time that they were getting back in the car, he was saying, Earl, we are writing the wrong movie. We got to go home. So they go back. They call it, the working title was Tracking the Falk Monster.
Obviously, one of the films that kind of like, when it came out, that actually acknowledged and referenced Boggy Creek was the Blair Witch Project, because those guys were huge fans of it. And, you know, it's interesting that, like, you know, there's a lot of docudramas that were made, but this was one of the few early on that was as effective as possible because it felt real.
It does have, a lot of people give it credit as being the first docudrama. And later on, you'll see like Unsolved Mysteries and the kind of crime shows today, and you kind of compare it to Boggy Creek, and it's very similar, but they didn't have that. If you adjust the earnings for, you know, today, Boggy Creek is the third highest grossing documentary in history, which that's really the only release it's ever had. We don't know what it did in the bootleg, you know, have no idea. So those numbers, that 25 million, which equates to $150 million today, was only for that theatrical run between 72 and 75.
I was going to say that's very, very impressive, especially because, like, it's an independent movie. It's a movie about Bigfoot. It's a docudrama or documentary style thing. That's just incredible. So what I want to ask you about now, I know you were very young while the film was being made, and I know you have a little role in it as well, but can you share some memories you have from the production?
Sure, yeah. Running, I'm the first child in, saying, Grandpa, we saw him. We saw the Falk Monster. And that's my real mother in the kitchen. She's peeling potatoes. And she says, shh, you're going to wake your grandpa. And, you know, I'm going to get a switch, she says. Anyway, then so we go out in the field, and then we see the creature step out from, you know, and my mom starts screaming, don't run. And she's running. So that's my real mother playing Bessie Smith. And I was in the 3rd grade. I didn't really know I was going to be doing that day. My uncle, who was my mother's brother, actually worked for my dad. He was one of the teenagers that was schlepping the camera and all that stuff. And he was pretty tall. So when they couldn't find another person to wear that suit, my uncle would be the one to do it. But I know that my uncle came to pick me up at school. He was in a bad mood. He said, your dad needs you. He's going to put you, you're going to be in a scene or something. And he was just really in not a good mood. So when I got there, I asked my dad, I said, where are you going to see it? You know, I mean, I wanted to know, that's what I want to know. Are we going to see this creature? Now, he was ignoring me and trying to stay away from me. When the creature steps out, that is a real scream, because I didn't know that was going to happen. So that was kind of fun. And it took like an afternoon. We did all of that in one take. The other thing too is my father, most of the money, he ends up running out of money on the 3rd day of principal photography. And most of the money had been spent on film. He wanted that Techniscope, which, if you know about Techniscope, I'm sure you do, that's that wide angle film format that was developed, I guess, in Italy for the spaghetti westerns. And he wanted it to have that big cinematic, you know, that just to envelop you, kind of, which was super important when it was released, because you really kind of felt like you were there when it starts out and it says, this is a true story. And then it goes dark for 30 seconds and you're sitting there with crickets and frogs. And then, you know, it's very effective because you're sitting there thinking, this is a true story, you know, and then it's a G film. So you've got a lot of younger kids, and like Blair Witch and others, your mind does all that work for you. You know, you don't really have to show a scary monster, though. He was pretty scary that day. And that was, so Steve Ledwell, heir of the original producer, Buddy Ledwell, his daddy, put the money up for the film. And so when my dad and Buddy broke up in 75, they actually broke up because, so Mr. Ledwell was he owned a big trucking outfit. They still do. They make custom trucks, big rigs, all that stuff. So Buddy would like to make money and all this stuff. Anyway, my dad talks him into putting the money up. Well, I didn't know this all that time. My dad got paid as if he were an owner, but my dad didn't own any of the film. Buddy held that title. So immediately they wanted to do Boggy Creek remakes, of course. And my dad wanted to show that he could do more. And he really wanted to do Dreaded Sundown. But Dreaded Sundown, again, is based on a true story. And here are the Lidwells, who were very socially prominent. Mrs. Lidwell's family had founded the Methodist Church. You know, I mean, they were kind of upstanding. So they could not, having the Falk Monster, a movie made about that, that was one thing. But they were not going to do Dreaded Sundown. So they broke up. Well, when they broke up, Mr. Lidwell had already made a whole bunch of money on that movie. He didn't need to make any more money. The home market was just beginning, like in 75. And the movie had played during that time a lot, as you probably, you know, at some theaters it stayed for a whole year. Okay, it played for an entire year. By that time in 75, when they split up, he put it away, and that was kind of it. That wasn't his business. And so there it really kind of sat short of this poor quality pan and scan, you know. But when the internet came along, I went pretty early on. Well, my husband said, sit down and did what's now surfing. So I sat down and it was Ask Jeeves. And I asked Jeeves, who is Charles B. Pierce? And then up came all this stuff on Boggy Creek. And that's the first time I ever read. And people said, somebody needs to get the rights worked out and somebody needs to get us a good print. I did call my dad, and that's when he told me, he said, well, he had traded it to Buddy, which wasn't exactly true, because in a way, I guess, but my dad went on and did Winterhawk, and Mr. Lidwell had been with him at the beginning of Winterhawk. So they separated during the making of Winterhawk. And then Lidwell got Boggy Creek and Bootleggers. So that's where it had sat. And then they didn't look back, you know, and they've got a big outfit there. When somebody calls up and says, oh, I want to do this with Boggy Creek, they just didn't even return phone calls. So, and then my dad would say, oh, that they had a bad breakup. But this is who my dad was, kind of. And he was like, oh, they don't talk to us anymore. So it was like, if you see them, go the other way. Well, of course, my dad didn't want me saying anything in case because my dad turned out to be one of the bootleggers. So, but so in 2014, I was still reading this all these years later, and they'd say, get the copyright, get it to good print. And I was like, yeah, somebody needs to do that. Somebody needs to do that. And then finally, it kind of falls into my lap. I'm named the executor of my father's estate. My father had Alzheimer's. And so what happened to him actually is, they say, at epidemic levels now with people that have Alzheimer's or dementia. As he got sicker and sicker, people moved in and isolated him and pretty much picked him dry. My husband is a businessman. He's got a bunch of stuff going on. So I was just going to stay out of it. But my brother was calling me, and he found a will. So he's like, here, sister, help me. So I filed that. And when I did, I let these people know, you need to turn over whatever papers, whatever you have, I need to see it. Well, they just pretty much ignored me. So when I don't have anywhere to go and I don't have any information, I don't have any papers, finally I decided I'm going to contact Steve Lidwell. Because by that time, he was the sole heir. Steve actually plays the monster in a lot of it. So there were 3 different people that played the monster. So Steve Lidwell was like 21 or 22 when this was happening. And so he then owned it. And so I called him and I said, my dad had come to him. He said, no, Pam, your daddy never came back here. He said, we never got any more money, whatever. So it was a little bit embarrassing, but the fact remained, nobody had a good print. And by this time in 2014, people were now asking for a Blu-ray. So I said, well, would you let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can track down a good print. And would you let me do the Blu-ray? And so he said, yes, he would. And so that's when it started. It took 4 years to find a good copy. I finally found it at the BFI, the British Film Institute. So, and then we were almost complete with the restoration remaster when Mr. Ledwell discovered the original negatives, sound reels, all that stuff. So we ended up using the original magnetic sound reels for the sound part of restoration. So that's kind of fun. I've been working on the soundtrack, and that will be coming out imminently. So that's been really exciting and surprising. You know, I knew that people wanted Boggy Creek. I had no idea that people really wanted the soundtrack. And there's a whole, as you probably know, there's a whole genre for horror soundtracks. So that was fun to hear. And so let me just kind of tell you about that a little bit. So the soundtrack was done by, his name is Jaime Mendoza Nava. And for years he had worked for Disney, along with Tom Boutros, who is the editor of Boggy Creek, and some others. And so when it came time to do the post-production work, they went to Los Angeles, and Jaime and Tom and several of these other guys had been laid off from Disney, and they had formed their own post-production company. So when he went in there, he was actually, those guys were experts, you know, they've been doing this for a long time. It's the first documentary to have its own musical score written especially for it. And so Jaime had worked on like the Mickey Mouse Club and other pretty, you know, some other well-known Disney stuff. But the big thing he'd done right before was that he wrote all the interludes for CBS's Walter Cronkite's The Apollo mission or whatever, you know, when they were, I think they broadcast for 24 hours or something like that. So all that music was done by Jaime. So he was in good hands on that part. And then, do you know about the poster, the Ralph McQuarrie?
I know it's one of the most iconic posters ever made. I don't know what the origin behind it is, but I would love to hear it.
So Jaime and those guys introduced my dad to Ralph McQuarrie, and Ralph had done some work for Boeing, I believe, and NASA. And so he creates that. It's actually an oil on canvas painting. My dad brings it back to Texarkana. He had an art director who worked for him because my dad had an ad agency when he was making the film. One of the guys, and he's actually credited in the film as the art director, John Ball. So John Ball did the bottom, it's where it says Boggy Creek, The Legend of Boggy Creek, G Film, all that typography at the bottom is John Ball. All right, so Ralph, let's go. So the image is created by Ralph McQuarrie. In 1975, George Lucas had these scripts that he had sent them to all the major studios in Hollywood, trying to get the green light, this Buck Rogers kind of trio of scripts. And so he hires McQuarrie on the spot. McQuarrie creates the 21 storyboards for Star Wars. It gets the green light. Ralph McQuarrie is the production designer for Star Wars, all of them. And he literally created the looks of, you know, C-3PO, R2-D2, Darth Vader, the stormtroopers, and Chewbacca. So in the things that I've read, they say that George Lucas wanted Chewbacca to be like his dog, was his inspiration, and also a lemur. And I do see a little bit of a lemur in the neck, and I see that companionship like a dog. But more than anything, I see Bigfoot. And so to put the Falcon Monster as the father of Chewbacca, for the Falcon Monster to be, because that was his first work right there. So I could also see somebody that had worked for NASA and Boeing, that they could come up with spaceships and that kind of stuff. But this creature that lives in the Arkansas swamps, that was a whole different thing. And let me tell you about John Ball. So the art director of Boggy Creek, he does the bottom part, and he works on my dad about 5 films with my dad, including Dreaded Sundown, and Evictors. And then he goes on, he moves to Kansas City, and he goes to work, and he's kind of a hippie. He likes to go barefoot. He's got long hair, and it was kind of a suit and tie place. So they give him this far off office, and they name it Shoebox Greeting Cards, and that's Hallmark. And Shoebox Greeting Cards is the most profitable card company in all the world and all of history, and it's their most profitable division. So when you think about it, that poster actually represents more billions and billions of dollars. Star Wars is the most profitable franchise in all of history. And then so you take a commercial artist such as Ralph McQuarrie, who's created that kind of value for his employer, and then you add John Ball on top of that. You see what I'm saying? And that image is very unique in the two artists that created it.
That's absolutely amazing that like that poster spawned Chewbacca and Hallmark greeting cards.
You know, my dad was very, that was maybe one of his greatest gifts, is that he was able to recognize talent very early on. And he gave a lot of people, you know, their first kind of job. So in the entertainment business. So.
Before we talk about the restoration, all that, I kind of want to circle back to after Boggy Creek came out and became a very, very, very financially successful. What did that success mean to your father at the time? Because he basically created his career as a film director.
No one really ever anticipated the kind of success, you know, and it was, I mean, it was, people camped out in lines with, you know, with sack lunches, and that didn't happen before. You know, people didn't wait in line for movies like that. Godfather was #1 at the box office. That was the year Cabaret, Poseidon Adventure, Deliverance, and I think Boggy Creek was number 8 or 9. So it was you know, I mean, and all those other movies had been released by, you know, big Poseidon Adventure. I mean, you probably remember that. That was big budget, you know, and even The Godfather was big budget. So my dad was he was thrilled, and he was paid as if he owned 50%. And I think by the time that they got the distributor and stuff, it dropped down. But he right away bought a Ferrari. Well, first he bought a Corvette. Okay. And then he went back to now the first time he comes back from Los Angeles to Texarkana, and he's got the McQuarrie painting and stuff. And one print of his movie, he rides the Greyhound bus home. Okay. Because he can't even afford to really get home. He's just kind of limping back. And he was way over budget. And so they had no idea. But again, it was that poster. And then it became word of mouth. So people would say, have you seen this movie? You've got to see this movie. There's never anything like it before, you know. And he four-walled. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I'll explain to the people who might not know. Four-walling means he basically paid for the theater. He rented the theater, but any money that came in from his ticket sales, he got to keep. So basically, it's a risk because a lot of movies do four-wall. A lot of people do it around Oscar season, trying to get Oscar nominations for films that probably shouldn't. But like a lot of independent distributors start out doing four-walling because then they don't have to give a percentage of the box office to the theater. They just take what they get.
Well, and a lot of times they don't want to do that. When my dad was trying to get a distributor for Boggy Creek, they hung up on him. Later on, like when he does Dreaded Sundown for Sam Arkoff, he was just so thrilled because Arkoff had literally hung up on him on the first go round. So later on to do that, you know, that was very satisfying. But my dad really never had the budget to do, like he wanted to really do some epics. If you ever saw The Norseman, you'll see his like grand try for that. But he can make movies for practically nothing. And that's before, you know, now we have the iPhones and you can film just about anything and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But back in the day, you had to have lights and cameras and, you know, assistants and, you know, all that stuff. So
it's a testament to your father because like, you know, do-it-yourself filmmaking and like kind of regional filmmaking at time. There's a lot of people that did it who basically did one film and then disappeared. He he's one of the rare breed that actually made a career, and he got to work with AIP, and I think he also worked with Roger Corman, and obviously he wrote a Dirty Harry movie for Clint Eastwood. So like he managed to parlay a little independent film about a legend of a Bigfoot monster into a full career, and that's kind of unheard of.
In his body of work, I think there's maybe 13 or 17 films that he produced, directed, released. And out of those, actually, he wrote a lot more. There's a lot of unproduced scripts that I'm still working to try to get a hold of and get them, like Clint Eastwood. Okay, Clint Eastwood is anxious, has said through his assistants that he's anxiously awaiting these other scripts. So I'm working on that. But out of the ones that were produced, 2 became cult classics: Boggy Creek and Dreaded Sundown, and the 6th most famous line, according to the American Film Institute, "Go ahead, make my day." So for a little bitty, kiddie show host from Arkansas to have 2 cult films and a classic, top 10 movie line, that was kind of a good, that was kind of a big deal.
Again, I'll say that's utterly amazing. But talking about something more amazing is that the work you put into getting Boggy Creek restored. Do you want to talk a little bit about working with the George Eastman House?
Oh, that's been such an honor to do. Early on, when my probate attorney and I started working together, he said, try to think like your dad would think. So that helped a lot. And I know that my dad had great respect for Eastman and Kodak and, all that. So one of the problems here was the rarity of the actual film reels. When my father and Mr. Ledwell had broken up, I was told that there were about 650 copies of the film, each copy consisting of 5 reels. So when they broke up, he told the distributors, ship all that film back here to their headquarters in Texarkana. So you can only imagine 5 reels times 650, a lot of film. They were swimming in film. So he ordered them destroyed. I think they burned them. And it wasn't any mean reason. It was just that's how you took care of stuff like that back at that time. So when that happened, that wiped out most of them. And then so every once in a while they would find one. I ended up getting a copy from the Joy Cinema in New Orleans down there on Canal Street, which that was my dad's distributor, and that was his landmark theater. So the print that I ended up getting first came from there. It was found, and I ended up buying it. I won an auction on eBay. Lyle Blackburn, the cryptozoologist, kind of alerted me to it. And he said, I know it's not public domain, but a lot of people, that's kind of the rumor. And he said, there's 2 bidders, anonymous bidders, and they're going at it pretty hard. And it's already gotten up to about $2,000, which is unusual. So he said, if I were you, I'd try to get it. And at that point in time, my daughter actually said, I don't think that you have anything else in the house that, I was thinking I actually ended up putting in a bid at about $11,000 or something, because I was not going to lose that. You know what I mean? So I kind of gathered all my resources that I could, and I got it for about $2,000. But anyway, so I posted that it was right before Christmas, a couple days before Christmas. That was like the best Christmas present ever. So of course the fans, I have a lot of Boggy Creek fans and my dad's fans that I'm friends with on Facebook. So one of them said to me, do you have someone to do the restoration? No, I didn't, I was just going each step. He said, I've got some connections to the George Eastman Museum if you would like me to introduce you. Well, when the guy said, do what your dad would do, and he says, George Eastman, I know who that is. You know what I mean? And here's the other thing too. Because Boggy Creek had been all these years in the home market in that pan and scan, it really did give it that cheesy kind of quality, where when the film was originally released, it was critically acclaimed for its cinematography, you know, and even its music and those kind of things. But I mean, the sound effects had all that had diminished. I couldn't even hear it. So I wanted someone, I didn't want just a nobody. I really wanted that prestige of like a George Eastman museum or something to kind of give it that cachet. I watched Night of the Living Dead and how they kind of had proceeded. And that was, you know, I kind of followed that a little bit. The other thing too is I live near Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so Burns had been instrumental. He introduced me to his entertainment IP lawyers for the copyright side. And he does a lot of work with the George Eastman Museum. So, you know, if it's good enough for Ken Burns, it is definitely good enough for me. So Kyle Alvitt did most of the work. He had been there, I think, for 40 years. He told me that when he was 19 years old, he got a job. They assigned him a number, shoes, you know, I think a bank account, like everything. And he worked for him for all those years. They have a school as part of their program at the museum. And I was happy to have students work on it. And I was very interested and wanted to know, what do these young students, what did they think of the film all these years later? Does it hold up? And all those kind of things. And so they do. They all enjoyed it. They ended up getting Boggy Creek t-shirts to wear to their graduation and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's just been a real honor. And I think of my dad and how he would have really have liked to have done this. So himself, you know, because he would have liked to have done it, I'm sure.
I mean, you're obviously cut for the same independent spirit here. So that leads me to my next question. Now, there's countless boutique Blu-ray, DVD labels out there who I personally feel like would have been interested in putting this out because it's a title that's been not really readily legally available, maybe never legally available in home video at all, because probably VHS were bootlegs at that point.
All home media, everything, VHS, television, everything after 1975 consisted of that pan and scan bootleg copy. That was it. This is the first official release. Yeah, in the correct Technoscope wide angle format. So now we're putting you back in that seat that you were in the theater, and it kind of enveloped you again. So, and the pan and scan didn't have that, as you know.
Yeah, it's obviously like pan and scan was one of the greatest disservices the home video market ever did to cinema. But I guess to finish off the question I was going to ask here is like, how did it come about that you ended up self-releasing Boggy Creek on Blu-ray and DVD?
So I just never really heard from anybody, to be honest with you. Like I wrote to Criterion because, you know, I asked people, I said, who's out there? They told me Criterion's the classy, fancy one. Of course, that's what I wanted to. So I wrote to them. And these days, you can't like call anybody because they have that whole eternal thing on the phone. It's just beep, beep, beep. And then I didn't have anybody's real email. So I just wrote into the general thing saying, look, my name is Pam Pierce. My dad made this movie and I've restored it at the George Eastman and I'm looking for a distributor. And I kept waiting for one to show up and nobody ever showed up. And so it's just that every single day people were writing me like, when are you going to release it? When are you going to? And I was like, I mean, how complicated is it? You know? So I used to hang out with my dad a whole lot and he liked to watch television. And so he would pull us all together and we would watch afternoon television. He still loved People's Court. But anyway, so we would be watching it and they would come on these Christy Lane. Do you remember Christy Lane? There was a gospel singer saying, sweet, one day at a time, sweet Jesus, one day at a time. And it would roll, it'd say 1-800, call this number, and da-da-da, and they kept playing it over and over and over. And my dad said, that's the way you do it. You own all your own. Christie's, he said, Christie's shipping those out to those people. And, you know, so that was always intriguing to him. And then early on, a fan said to me, do you realize how rare of a position you are in that you own and control this classic movie? He said that's reserved for names like Disney and Turner and Warner's or whatever. He said that just doesn't happen. And so when he said that, it made me more cautious, and I reached out and I found they're the #1 independent producer of Blu-ray DVDs, and they make them here in the States. So that's who I went to first, and they've done an excellent job. I love the way that they authored the thing. We actually won first runner up in the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards. We won first runner up for best Blu-ray DVD, and we got an honorable mention for best restoration. So that was a real honor, because we were up against Criterion. We actually lost to Criterion War of the Worlds, but we were against like Warner Brothers and those. So my husband is an inventor, and he invented a very beloved arcade game called the CHEXX hockey, and sometimes they call it the bubble top hockey. So he had done that. He had invented simulator arcade like amusement rides. Some of Mission to Mars at Disney was based on a ride that my husband introduced there. And then he was working on an ATM that connects to the internet, which is a whole different thing. Anyway, so for about 30 years, I worked pretty closely with him and went to lots and lots and lots of meetings with attorneys about intellectual property. So when that time came that I called Mr. Ledwell to ask him if he'd let me put it on a Blu-ray, by that time, I had an idea of what would be needed, what I was going to need to do. So I did have that little bit of background. And I do feel, this sounds crazy, but I do feel like I was called, if that sounds a little bit unique, but I felt like I was called, like a higher calling kind of. And I remember kind of wrestling about it, thinking, I don't have that kind of money. How am I going to do that? I don't have money like that. I don't know anybody that does. I haven't been in the film business in years and years. So, but I did get this, it felt like instructions. It was like, you step out there, and then each place, when you get to that bridge, there'll be the people that you need. They'll be waiting for you. So that's what I did. And it's each step of the way, really and truly, those people have been there. So it feels like almost miraculous. If that's as crazy as that sounds.
Before I let you go, Pam, my last question for you is, what does the future look like for the Legend of Boggy Creek and its legacy, as well as your father's legacy?
So I really hope to do a documentary on the making, like how Boggy Creek was made, all the behind the scenes, because the story behind Boggy Creek and my dad's life is almost a greater story than anything he ever put up on the screen. So I hope to do that. I actually hope to do a drama, with it too. I'm trying to find a way. I'm going to reach out to Billy Bob Thornton, actually, see if he wants to do a screenplay, whatever. He's from Malvern, Arkansas, which is only 100 miles away, and was there when the whole thing. So there's some people that I think could really do justice in telling these other stories behind the scenes. And then I actually own that Ralph McQuarrie painting. So I hope to get that into a museum so that people can go and see it. Right now, George Lucas is working on his Narrative Arts Museum, but there's not a lot of places that you can see McQuarrie. So that's a project that I've been working on. So I do have some people. I got lots of interest on the soundtrack. So, and I think that I've picked my label that I'm going to go with, and I'm going to go ahead and get some help. It's a little nerve-wracking to do this by yourself.
Like a lot of boutique Blu-ray labels, there's a ton of boutique soundtrack labels out there that do quality work. So, and I don't know, and you don't have to reveal who you're going with, but obviously there's a lot of top tier ones. So whoever you go with, you can't go wrong, especially with something like this.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited about doing it. I never in my wildest dreams considered that part of it. But early on, Lyle Blackburn, who's been extraordinarily helpful in this whole process, had said to me that was one of the most common questions that he got as people ask about the soundtrack. So when we found those original magnetic reels, that was just so exciting. I want to say this too. That scream in the movie is the first vocalization ever recorded of a creature like this. So that is, that's the real thing. And my dad and Earl and those guys recorded it as they were making the movie.
That's incredible. Pamela, I want to thank you for your time. Real quick before I let you go, can you tell fans of Boggy Creek or people that are just now learning about Boggy Creek, they're listening to this, where they could find Boggy Creek merch at online?
Sure. Yeah, at www.legendofboggycreek.com. We have a store, t-shirts with the Macquarie image, posters, that whole thing. And we also, we have a store, Boggy Creek, on eBay. And you can stream it on Amazon, YouTube Movies, Microsoft, and iTunes. And soon I will be uploading it in 4K on my own. It'll be on my own site, boggycreek.com. So that I almost have complete now. So you'll actually, because a lot of people have asked me, where can Amazon? I can't load it up on Amazon in 4K.
Somehow that's not shocking.
It will soon be available for fans that want to see it in 4K. And then hopefully in the future, if we keep going in the direction we're going, we'll have a UHD, sometime in the future. But
excellent. Pamela, thank you for your time. And look forward to what else is coming down the pike for Legacy, your father, and obviously Boggy Creek.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me on. Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yes, let's absolutely do it again.
Bye, y'all.
Stay tuned. We'll continue the search for Bigfoot on the Cinematic Void podcast after this break.
Unbearable suspense that keeps you on the edge of an abyss of terror.
Take a cult film odyssey into Cinemadness with Cinematic Void. Based in Los Angeles, Cinematic Void is a film series that specializes in horror and exploitation films. Currently, we are hosting Cinematic Void Up All Night in the Cinemadness movie, a monthly virtual screening series, as well as the Cinematic Void podcast, where we dive deeper into the world of cult cinema. You can find Cinematic Void on the World Wide Web at cinematicvoid.com, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you like what we do, you can support Cinematic Void by joining our Patreon. Until next time, see you in the void. Joining us now is the Emperor of Cinema Arcana. You're a trash aficionado, Bigfoot enthusiast, and the only ska band drummer I will ever tolerate. Please welcome to the void, Bruce Holecheck. Bruce, how are you doing?
Hello. Happy to be here. It's about time. I've only known you guys for like 25 years. I mean, Jesus. And speaking of drummers, little known fact, me and Nick were in a straight edge hardcore band known as Inner Struggle a good 24 years ago, maybe. Could we have come up with a more generic name for a band? Like, would that be possible?
I think it was maybe a title of a Strife song or something.
Are you still nailed to the X? Because I'm pretty sure my nails fell out.
Nowhere close. Sorry.
These things happen. I think we wrote like 4 songs and played one show, possibly.
I think it was just that one show. Yeah. At like some VFW hall and
right. It was like a fire hall. Right.
Yeah.
A fire hall in like Bel Air South or something.
The good old days.
The good old days. And Jim, we've known each other for just pretty much the same amount of time, all of us being in local Maryland bands at the time, and you and I became friends over a mutual love of garbage horror movies.
Yeah. I've mentioned if you've listened to this podcast enough, you know I've dropped Bruce's name a lot. And by the way, how do you actually say your last name? Is it Holecheck or is it Holecheck, as you said?
So here's the thing. When I was growing up, I always pronounced it Holecheck. A weird, long, roundabout story, but whatever. We got time. When we were doing the interview, when I was doing the interview with Sybil Danning for Chained Heat, I came back and she was talking up a movie that she co-produced and had some financial interest in called Panther Squad, which is now out on Blu-ray from Full Moon. So she asked me, oh, hey, is there anything you could do to possibly get this movie out there as well? That would be great. I'd love to work on it. And so I looked it up and found out that Eurocine in France had the rights to the film. So I got in contact with Daniel Lesoeur, who was in charge of Eurocine at the time, and still is, to get a screener copy of it. And he started calling me on the phone from France because he was really interested in my last name. It turns out his wife's maiden name was Holecheck. And we were just like, well, that's crazy. What a small world. And he's like, oh, I was like, I pronounce it Holecheck. And he's like, oh, over here, it's pronounced Holecheck. So I said, okay. So I talked to my granddad and said, hey, what is the correct pronunciation of this? And he said, well, it was Holecheck, but when the family came to the US, it became Holecheck because that's just how it looked. So that's how it became pronounced. And then for, 3 generations, that is how it was. But in the spirit of being a Eurotrash aficionado, and after talking to Mr. Daniel Lesoeur from Eurocine, I decided I was going to take it back. And now it is pronounced Holecheck.
Because I was about to say, I was going through a Mandela effect or Bernstein Bears thing. After all these years. It's like, how is it some guy that I knew for like fucking 25 plus years and like I didn't know his last name?
Right. Yeah, it's funny because Art on the Untold Story commentary, he pronounces it. I think at the beginning I pronounce it correctly, and then he keeps coming in saying Holecheck. And then he was listening back to it and he's like, wait, did I fuck up your name? So yeah, this is not the first time I've had this conversation. And probably won't be the last. And who knows, maybe some day down the road, I'll decide to change it again. But either way, we're good.
So besides, punk and all that and love of horror movies, like Bruce has been one of the people who was instrumental to introducing me to a lot of movies that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, because Bruce was an avid collector of VHS from all over the world. He also had a lot of bootlegs, and he was kind enough to dupe me some of those.
Like 3 on a tape at EP speed, dubbed from my bootlegs. Like, I can't even imagine what those look like. The shit we used to put up with. It's ridiculous.
And now you get fucking beautiful HD. It's an amazing thing to think back on. But Bruce also loaned me his copy of the Deep Red Horror Handbook and like all kinds of stuff that informed me to make me the just trash cinema enthusiast that I am today. So it's, I'm really happy to have Bruce on here. We tried to have you back on, I think, one of the Fulci episodes, but I think you're doing commentaries when we were recording.
Yeah, maybe. I get really obsessive when I'm doing a commentary. So it sort of becomes all consuming as compared to other people that just, jump on the mic and shit some of these things out. It's a lot of work for me. So yeah, usually I kind of shut things down and limit any other activities for a little bit as I'm putting them together. I'm actually working on one now for Severin that hasn't been announced yet. That's due at the end of the month. Another one with Art Ettinger for a Italian exploitation favorite. So hopefully we don't screw that up.
Regardless of how you say your name now, but the reason why we have you here today is because besides all the horror and the Euro trash and all that kind of stuff, you're a big Bigfoot enthusiast.
Say it 5 times fast.
Fuck you, but
yeah, well, I mean, it's always been a subject of interest. I mean, back from the band days, I mean, we used to, have Bigfoot emblems all over our stuff, and like our lyrics notes on our CDs and stuff had images of the Squatch. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. Ever since we were kids, and I mean, you guys are, roughly the same age as I am. So growing up in the 80s, I mean, we, always, we were kind of, I wouldn't say inundated with Bigfoot, but if you watched the kind of programming that we did, things like, In Search Of and Unsolved Mysteries and shows like that, eventually they would all have a Bigfoot topic. Plus there was, plenty of, there was movies, there was, made for TV movies, and Bigfoot was just kind of like a part of popular culture. And it was really fascinating to me, the idea that, there could be these, crazy humanoid creatures living out in the woods was just always really cool. And, it probably helped that, those episodes of those TV shows were creepy as hell anyway.
Another thing I should mention is that where your parents lived was in, say, northern Harford County in Maryland. Not trying to give away much, but it's pretty
why don't you tell them the fucking address, Jim?
Well, you have to take, fuck. I almost thought I could remember the address after all these years, but you basically lived in the middle of fucking nowhere. There's woods around you. So theoretically, you probably lived near a Bigfoot.
Probably, right. Yeah. I mean, the odds were good.
Because I remember we used to go up to your parents' house for movie night, and like, this shit got fucking creepy out there in the woods. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know at one point for years, and I'm hoping this still happens. So maybe as we talk about on the podcast, we can build that energy. You always want to make a Bigfoot movie.
Oh yeah, big time. Titled Wrath Squatch. Which
I remember parts of the concept. I don't want to give it away because I don't want anyone stealing this shit. But like, because it's I hope it happens at some point because it's a masterpiece waiting to happen.
Right. I mean, it'd kind of be like an art house Bigfoot splatterfest. Like, sort of imagine if like Alejandro Jodorowsky was in charge of the Patterson Gimlin film. It would be fantastic.
The highest of high concept Bigfoot movies. But
and it's really funny because a lot of the shots that I originally wanted, like, were trying to plan out, like, now would be so much easier with drones. Like, now that everybody's doing like those HD drone shots, like every single independent movie you watch nowadays has this damn overhead HD drone shot, like, over the woods. And that would have been like so perfect for what I wanted to do. I'll never make it. Because let's face it, I'm old now, and there's not a chance in hell.
Man, but you can't give up on your dreams. God damn it!
I'm telling you, we missed the right time. The early 2000s would have been where it was at. But such is life.
Such is life. But I guess we can talk about a few Bigfoot movies that did get made. And we talked about doing this episode, it's like you picked the movies, as we like to do for some of our guests.
Right.
And you picked 5, one of which we're just going to kind of gloss over because we talked to the creator's daughter in the previous segment. You still want to mention. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that one and your, I guess, second pick.
Yeah. So we'll go into this a little bit. So interestingly, one of the coolest things about Bigfoot films in general, at least to me, is the idea that it's almost like Bigfoot mania was almost a uniquely American genre. You would get a few films from other countries, like Hammer did an Abominable Snowman movie in the 50s. Toho did Half Human. There was that crazy 70s Italian movie, Yeti, Giant of the 20th Century. That's really bonkers, but it also has an amazing disco theme song, which is probably better than any of the music for any of the rest of these Bigfoot movies. So you should probably end the show playing the disco theme from Yeti, Giant of the 20th Century. But none of them really feel like true Bigfoot movies to me. So after, we had mentioned the Patterson Gimlin film, which is, the campers in the woods who, notoriously, quote unquote, filmed the Bigfoot. And that's become like really the most legendary footage and the, most seen image of, any of these Bigfoot things. And, that was kind of like all pervasive in anything Bigfoot related that we saw, when we were kids. So with that footage, like the scientific community kind of like shot it down, but where it really blew up was in pop culture. They licensed it to all these like investigative report TV shows and news channels and documentaries and stuff like that. So that was really kind of step one in the the cultivation of Bigfoot mania in the US. And there were a few Bigfoot movies after that came out in the US. Like there was that, sort of biker versus Bigfoot movie, Bigfoot, with John Carradine from 1970. And there was the hardcore porn, The Geek, which basically, this guy that looks like they just threw a bunch of shag carpets all over them, running around the woods trying to rape chicks. So that was from 71, but it wasn't really until 1972 with Charles B. Pierce's The Legend of Boggy Creek that things really went nuts. So The Legend of Boggy Creek purports to tell the story of the Falk monster. It's a hairy creature living in the swamps of Arkansas. The whole film's kind of told in a documentary style, relating multiple stories of the beast crossing paths with the town's residents, usually told by the townspeople themselves in the actual locations where they allegedly happened. To me, where the film really gets it right is in its atmosphere. They kind of keep the beast hidden for most of the film. And, you know, it's shot in scope for some reason, which if you're trying to lend a movie a documentary feel, I don't know why it was shot in scope, because it's a lot of handheld camera work, but it really does capture a lot of that, you know, deep South sort of like Arkansas flavor to it. And mixed with the voiceovers, I mean, it's almost, I don't want to oversell it, but it's almost like a Terrence Malick-esque combination of like these voiceovers with these, you know, deep woods visuals. And it really gives it a great creepy atmosphere that I think really worked well, especially considering the movie's G-rated. You know, there's really nothing explicit about it at all, but it really kind of gets under your skin in spots and really is quite terrifying for what it is.
The thing I like about Boggy Creek is like it's what I like about Charles B. Pierce's movies in general, because like he kind of like the docudrama style, like Count of Dread Sundown, which I just recently rewatched on 4th of July. Not that
it's a great one.
Not that it's a 4th of July movie. I guess Zodiac would be the quintessential serial killer on 4th of July movie, but it's a good Southern fried movie, even though it has the bit of exploitation comedy where I think it was Charles B. Pierce's character plays the comedic role.
Well, yeah, it's so weird. Like, right, Andrew Prine's like running around and stuff, and the cops are so ridiculous, and then the horror scenes in that movie are really strong.
And that's what I like about his style, because like, you know, like he came out of advertising, which, you know, a few filmmakers have come out of advertising and industrials and stuff. But like the reason why I think Boggy Creek works, especially when I think scope is not really a documentary format, but like for something that gives a grand view of the South and living there and a creature in the woods, it's a perfect format. And I think like, you know, it's G-rated, so a lot of kids could go see it. It's weird that it got nearly lost after all these years, because it has theatrical run and just like went to VHS and was on the bootleg market ever since. It's kind of like a weirdly sincere, I guess that's weird to say sincere about a Bigfoot movie, but it's very sincere in how it's done. And it's like, you know, real people and real reactions. And it's like, when I talked to Pamela, she kept talking about the Blair Witch Project, which has a similar like capturing of blending of reality and not reality. Well, obviously there's more reality in Boggy Creek because people thought they saw and heard the monster, whereas Blair Witches, none of that shit actually happened. But it kind of did create a format of like things to come, like, or the trick of like this movie's based on a true story kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's kind of the, you know, one of the rules in the exploitation rule book is that, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter how good a movie is, it just matters how much money it makes. And this one, you know, the budget was estimated at like 100,000, and it pulled in like 25 million on the rental circuit and the theatrical circuit, which is an insane amount of money for an independent. And I mean, it really kind of, you know, is what turned Charles Pierce into a filmmaker. But yeah, you know, it's funny because one of the people who disagrees with the film is one of the guys who actually served as a consultant to it. You know, one of the people whose family were, you know, had some of the alleged encounters with the Falk monster, and they're peppered throughout the films themselves. So that would be Smokey Crabtree, who actually wrote a book about the entire experience of the film and what he claims the film got wrong. So I actually, sometime in the 90s, you know, back in the good old days, I actually called Smokey Crabtree on the phone because I had this idea that I wanted to do an article about Charles Pierce and I wanted to have some sidebars to it. And I thought one of the cool ideas would be, you know, a small interview with Smokey Crabtree to get his perspective on it after, you know, learning about his book. At the time, he had like this website set up with all this stuff. So I just called the number to see if I could get his information. And like, he answered the damn phone himself. And he's just this old guy, but he completely refused to be interviewed about the movie. And he's like, you know, he basically told me, he's like, I don't wish Charles Pierce dead or nothing, but I hate that son of a bitch. So like he was really pissed off that that Charles Pierce turned Boggy Creek into a horror movie, because essentially he was saying, that's not what it was. It was this creature out there in the woods, and he was trying to claim it was benevolent and it wasn't attacking people and stuff like as displayed in the film. But I mean, if you're going to make a movie about it, you kind of need to have it build up to those attack scenes, and I think that's what really works. That like that siege finale is really what makes the movie memorable.
I mean, did he want Harry and the Hendersons?
I don't know. And there's part of me that wonders if maybe he kind of got screwed as part of like the business deal and got real jealous that Charles Pierce made all this money off the movie. But I don't know. Unfortunately, like I said, he wouldn't submit to an interview no matter how hard I argued with him for it. I'm like, oh no, this is your chance to tell your side. And he's like, rah. So
I guess we'll never know the politics of Bigfoot movies.
Right. And he's dead now. I mean, he died, a few years back. So I guess maybe I should buy his book to get his perspective, but whatever.
Maybe that's what it was. He's like, I'll talk to you after you read my book.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so like after Boggy Creek hit, I mean, there was multiple docudramas, a bunch of which incorporated the Patterson Gimlin footage. So you had like the Mysterious Monsters and Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot. And I mean, there's TV movies like The Curse of Bigfoot and Snow Beast. And then just standard theatrical kind of horror-esque movies. Like Bill Rebane did one called The Capture of Bigfoot. Joy M. Houck did, if you have the Legend of Boggy Creek, why not have The Creature from Black Lake? Like close enough. Which actually that one's going to be coming out on Blu-ray as well pretty soon. Synapse is actually going to be popping that out.
It's a good time to love Bigfoot in HD.
I'm telling you. But yeah, I mean, he even fought the $6 Million Man in a major 2-part TV event. So yeah, the 70s were a major era for Bigfoot mania.
Now, the next film we're going to talk about came out.
Before you get to that, I do want to say, so yeah, if you haven't picked up the Legend of Boggy Creek Blu-ray that Pamela herself put out, definitely do so, because it does restore the full scope framing. For the longest time watching the movie, you had to settle for heavily cropped prints that just looked like garbage. A lot of VHS masters or 16 millimeter prints. So yeah, it's great to actually have the full scope framing put back in place so you can actually see the entire image. So yeah, I'm sure she talks about that in her segment, but I just want to reiterate, damn it. Anyway, not to interrupt, go ahead. Movie number two. And this one's a personal favorite of mine. I think it's a personal favorite of yours. Is it a personal? I was going to say, I included it on my top 5 list. So I would say, yes, it's a personal favorite.
And Nick, I believe it's a personal favorite of yours as well.
This
No, it's not. Oh my God. You guys are going in all the wrong order.
Oh, we usually go in chronological. Then which one are you going?
No,
first?
Look, I put these in numerical order, pal. These are ranked in order of favorite. So you need to edit out all the stuff of you giving away my number 1 title.
Fuck it. All right. Let me look at your order again.
All right. Well, I don't know if I sent them to you in order. I didn't know that was a thing.
I just put them in chronological, so I don't know. So anyway, forget all that.
Yes.
Bruce, what's your number 2 or number 1 or what number is this?
Number 4. Number 4
Bigfoot movie. What's your number 4?
Number 4 would be Emmett Alston's DEMONWARP from 1988.
Now, for those of you who might recognize Emmett Alston's name, he was the director of New Year's Evil, as well as the original director of X-Ray before being fired.
Yeah, and he did a couple things for Crown International, 3 Day Pass, 9 Deaths of the Ninja. He also did a 3 Ninjas ripoff called 3 Little Ninjas.
Yeah,
how to ride those coattails.
He did a few ninja movies. That he did something called Force of the Ninja. It seems like you got Bigfoot, ninjas, and a sexploitation movie. So
I mean, what else do you need, right?
Really?
So DEMONWARP tells the tale of a car full of college kids who head to a getaway cabin deep in the California woods. They're lured there under the guise of a wild weekend, but in actuality, one of them has plans to investigate a rash of mysterious occurrences that his uncle, the owner of the property, has reported to him. One such occurrence being the Sasquatch attack of name star George Kennedy following a thrilling on-screen game of Trivial Pursuit, resulting in the death of his daughter and the theft of her body. The college kids pretty much immediately come face to face with Bigfoot, who breaks down the door and rampages like a proper monster, snapping a neck, kidnapping one of their friends, and apparently stealing a car engine. The surviving kids realize they'll have to hike through the wilderness if they want to make it home alive, but they really have no idea what they're up against. And, oh yeah, about an hour in, zombies show up.
How's this your number 4 then?
Right. So I really like this one because it's just so goddamn off the wall. The story for the film was actually by effects legend John Carl Buechler, and it's just full of odd plot tangents and a completely what the fuck climax involving like a heart-ripping cultist and a Muppet alien. And along the way, I mean, there's a head ripped off, a tree branch impaling. One guy gives a bunch of bad Jack Nicholson impressions. There's a few surprising deaths and like just a whole bunch of nudity. One of the zombies wears a Residence shirt. Michelle Bauer shows up looking for a pot farm and immediately takes her shirt off for like no reason. So yeah, it's really a lot of fun. It's one of those kind of 80s kitchen sink monster movies where anything goes.
I'd say it basically takes place in the Bridgewater Triangle, if you've heard of that. Just like, you know, every type of occurrence happens there, you know,
right?
UFOs, Bigfoot, quicksand,
exactly.
all the 80s tropes.
The one thing I was going to say is that I've seen a lot of people talk about this online, be like, I want a Blu-ray of this, and I think it's a Lionsgate title, isn't it?
Yeah. So the movie was actually it was the inaugural production for Richard Albert, who was a Hollywood advertising exec, you know, for the major studios, and Mark Amin, who was actually one of the founders of Vidmark, which was the VHS company that put the movie out. So it was actually produced by Vidmark, who eventually became TriStar, and I think were eaten up by Artisan. That was eventually went to.
Hey, I'm going to correct you real quick because you said TriStar instead of Trimark.
Whatever. You are correct. Yes. So by all accounts, it should be in with Lionsgate. I mean, it's, you know, the lineage is it's not even really much to guess at. It should be 100% with Lionsgate. You know, Mark Amin, you know, from Trimark, he went from doing this to, you know, working on the Leprechaun series and pretty much everything Trimark was involved in for like the next decade, up to the point of Frida with Salma Hayek. So, I mean, he kind of ran, you know, from starting from DEMONWARP all the way up to, you know, the multiple award-winning Frida is a pretty lengthy career run.
It's the only way to do a career, really. You know,
right.
Start with a fucking batshit Bigfoot movie and then go for the Oscar goal.
Right. And obviously, you know, John Carl Buechler, by this time, he was already, you know, a really established effects guy, you know, working on a bunch of Empire Picture stuff. And plus, he had already directed like Troll and Cellar Dweller by then. And the same year this was being made, he was directing Friday 13th Part 7. So, you know, obviously that was the reason why, you know, he wasn't directing this one himself per se.
I have a feeling he would have rather directed this one at the end of the day after his experience on that one.
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right. The only other name that really popped out from this movie is probably Billy Jacoby, who sort of plays the comedy sidekick character in this. But he was actually he was like the little kid in X-Ray. And then like he was in Bloody Birthday, he was in The Burbs, just one of the guys. So I mean, he had a pretty decent run, but the rest of them, nobody else I recognized immediately offhand. I mean, I guess I could have really sleuthed it on the IMDb to see if I missed somebody, but that was really about it.
I mean, they had to give most of the money to George Kennedy anyway.
Right. But yeah, I mean, to me, this would be perfect for inclusion in Lionsgate's Vestron line. And really, John Carl Buechler made a follow-up to this. I mean, not a sequel, but like a movie that wasn't made long after this that was also produced by Mark Amin, called The Sleeping Car, where David Naughton rents out David Naughton is like going back to school after a divorce or something, so he rents out this haunted locomotive caboose that's like in somebody's backyard, and like the caboose kills everybody. Like it's putting like bed springs through people and like folding them up in the bed. It's surprisingly really good. It has a really witty script, some cool effects. David Naughton's always great. I mean, ever since American Werewolf in London, I've loved him. So, but yeah, that'd be another great Vestron title too. I mean, I assume if it was also produced by Mean, that would also be part of the Lionsgate library for now. So let's start lobbying for Vestron Blu-rays of DEMONWARP and The Sleeping Car.
The only reason I bring it up is because I know Vestron still pops things out at a much slower rate. So
right.
I'd like to see him pick it up and pick up some of the weirder stuff, because I know they got some of the Ilsa movies, and I think they
yeah. I don't know what the trouble is with those. I mean, other than the fact that they're probably too extreme for Lionsgate. They don't necessarily tarnish their image, I guess, with some of those Cinepix like sleaze movies. But yeah, I mean, they do have some stuff coming out. I mean, they're finally doing Sundown, Vampire and Retreat, which is a pretty fun one. They're doing The Wraith. So I mean, at least they're doing stuff, I guess. At some point I would think that they have to do Brian Usna's The Dentist movies. I mean, HD Masters exist for those, so I would think that they'd be, coming down the pipe at some point.
I also know I think they got Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 through 5 as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see those as a series. I mean, they're not the greatest movies, but I'd buy the shit out of it,
I know there's at least HD masters of like 4 and 5 floating out there. I think they're open mat, but
is 5 the toy maker?
5's the toy maker with Mickey Rooney, who went full circle after like trying to get the first one banned, starring in part 5.
I remember seeing that on cable and just being like, what the fuck is this? Like the scene where the doll boy pulls down his pants and he has like the just a plastic flat crotch. Hopefully I'm not confusing that with another movie, but I'm pretty sure it's the toy maker. And then 4 was the Brian Usna one with like the bugs, right? Like the initiation. It was like the weird like insect people cult thing.
With Clint Howard, it was picked up the what's his name role, the only carry through from like all 4 movies, or the first 4 movies, and Usna produced part 5 and like had Mickey Rooney was doing press for 5, which is just incredible that Mickey Rooney's funny. Like, I'm in this movie called Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, the toy maker. So just to kind of get back to Bigfoot, how would you recommend on a scale of 1 to 10 on a Bigfoot scale, like how impactful is the actual Bigfoot footage in this one?
It's weird. It's one of those movies where everything kind of feels like a tangent. like the through line of the plot starts where Bigfoot's pretty important, but by the last half hour, it goes off in so many different directions that Bigfoot's almost irrelevant. And I mean, I don't want to give too much away in case somebody does want to watch it. Like I said, it's unfortunately it's a VHS holdout for now. It's never been on DVD, as far as I know. I didn't feel like digging out my tape, so I actually watched it on YouTube to prepare for this, which is something I'm like morally opposed to, but whatever. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Look, man, if Lionsgate would put it out on Blu-ray,
there we go.
There we go. But we're going to take a quick commercial break, but we return. More Holecheck, more Bigfoot on the Cinematic Void podcast.
You really believe there's a creature?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I do. From Black Lake is coming to a theater near you. A Jim McCullough production, rated PG.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Bigfoot with Bruce Holecheck of Cinema Arcana. I said it right. God damn it. After 25 years, I have to learn your fucking name again, man.
Right. I like to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, you always do. So this coming up here is the number 3 Bigfoot movie out of your
number
top 5.
3.
Ooh, so what is it, Bruce?
Well, it's a curveball because this is not a horror movie. This is indeed Fred Wolf's Strange Wilderness from 2008.
Now, Fred Wolf was a longtime SNL writer, right?
He was the head writer on SNL for through most of the 90s, I think from like 91 and 97, and he did almost 100 episodes of it.
That's a lot of comedy. So I guess why don't you enlighten us about Strange Wilderness?
I can do that. Now, you guys have both seen this movie, I assume?
I've seen it.
Perfect. Well, for those of you who haven't, Strange Wilderness follows Steve Zahn as the son of a famous nature documentarian who's finding it difficult to keep the show afloat following his father's passing. He's given an ultimatum by the network head that he needs a ratings knockout or else it's cancellation time. So he does what anybody would do, and that is to buy a map to Bigfoot's hideout in Ecuador from Joe Don Baker, Buford Pusser himself, and assemble a crew to go film the fucker. And of course, they'll be making several episodes along the way, showcasing whatever wildlife they come across, sometimes literally. The problem is, rival show host Harry Hamlin is after the same scoop and has a several-day head start, meaning the team really has to pull together if they want to get there first. So in the 80s, besides the watching all these crazy supernatural shows and mystery shows, I was also a big fan of nature shows, stuff like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom or Lauren Green's New Wilderness, or even I guess for the younger crowd watching this, Croc Hunter, that sort of shit. But if you're a fan of that sort of genre, there's really a lot to like in this movie. It's at once kind of an affectionate tribute to the genre as well as ridiculously profane updating. The intermittent show clips with heavily researched facts like monkeys make up over 80% of the world's monkey population, and sharks are the assholes of the sea are really a lot of fun. And the bit with them with this dopey shark with oversized teeth and them just giving it a completely ridiculous stupid laugh just had me in tears. I mean, it's the kind of movie that makes you feel high even if you're not high, which is always a good thing. The bit where Steve Zahn gets his dick stuck in the turkey's throat is just an absolute classic. They have a nurse trying to massage it off of his cock, and Justin Long tells her to cup the beak. And then there's this bit with Robert Patrick telling this Amazon pygmy story that's just absolutely hilarious. Thong gag, and then of course the final revealed fate of Bigfoot. Yeah, it's just really, really funny. Plus, when we saw it in theaters, I know during the break we were trying to remember if me and you saw it together or not. I definitely remember our buddy the Puke was there, but it also works in footage from Faces of Death into its narrative. And the idea of seeing footage of Faces of Death screened in a mainstream comedy at your local multiplex is just hilariously subversive. So yeah. And also interestingly, having, in prep for this podcast, having watched both this and DEMONWARP back to back, Bigfoot's lair is the exact same Bronson Canyon location in both fucking movies. So yeah, that was amazing to me.
Bronson Canyon puts in work. It's the Batcave. It's like countless like exploitation movies. It's a good location.
Right.
Nick and I, for our current band project, actually did a photo shoot there too. No Bigfoots though.
Right. So yeah, the movie was produced by Happy Madison, which is Adam Sandler's company. So it shares a lot of the cast with Adam Sandler movies, but it also has roles for like Justin Long and Jonah Hill, a real early role for him. Ernest Borgnine shows up, Kevin Heffernan from the Broken Lizard movies. And I always thought it was kind of funny that, the two best Happy Madison comedies, this and Grandma's Boy, don't feature Adam Sandler at all. So I don't know if that's, telling us something or what.
I mean, it's telling Adam Sandler something.
But yeah, unfortunately for Fred Wolf, the movie kind of flopped. They spent like $20 million on it and only made $7 million. So his career didn't really take off as far as directing goes. I mean, he did direct Joe Dirt 2, if that's your cup of tea. Not so much mine. But yeah, this film I think is just genius. It's so goddamn funny. I mean, I think comedies are really missing that sort of silly zaniness that this movie kind of encapsulates. I mean, what was like the last comedy that you saw that really cracked you up?
I think the movies that crack me up the most probably aren't intentional comedies anymore.
The last one I can remember that, like a recent comedy that really fucking had me howling, was Game Night with Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams. Like, if you haven't seen that, I mean, there's so many good gags in that. Yeah, it's really, really, really funny.
Trying to think, the last like I know overt comedy was Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, which I enjoyed, but I also felt like some of those jokes didn't hit. It was, it's typical like SNL thing where like there's really good jokes and then there's just like things just fall flat. Wasn't as good as Bridesmaid or anything like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, I think you're right. It's just people aren't really going in for like silly comedies. And it's a weird movie because I remember the ad campaign for this, and I think they didn't really sell it very well, at least from the trailers. Obviously, they had the shark bit in there, which was like hilarious, but like I don't know if it sold the movie to like the general audience.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say there's probably only a few of us that would find that hilarious, but I mean, it worked for me. It got my ass in the theater. So
it's also that weird era where Steve Zahn was getting like big roles. I guess it was after Out of Sight, where like he kind of had his little breakthrough of playing like the stoner guy, and then like parlayed that to play the stoner guy and a lot of other things.
Wasn't he in that he was in that other horror thing too that actually was really good, with the trucker, Rusty Nail. What the hell was that called?
What the hell is that called?
No, where they have the trucker on the CB. You know what I'm talking about, right? And like his handle's Rusty Nail, but then he starts stalking them. Isn't it like Lily Sobieski, and is it like Paul Walker or something?
Is it Joyride?
Yes, Joyride. Yeah, who's in Joyride? Was it Paul Walker?
It was Paul.
That up?
I think it is Paul Walker. What's cheap?
Paul Walker, Steve Zahn, and Lily Sobieski. That's what I'm going with. Well, I'm looking this up because now I'm. I don't want to be wrong on the internet.
Pretty good.
Oh, directed by John Dahl, who did like The Last Seduction and stuff. Red Rock West. Yeah, so actually I didn't realize that was from him. So no wonder it was actually good. That movie, actually, it's funny because, not to go off on a tangent, but Joyride, like the Joyride DVD actually had like an alternate ending, like the original ending, how they filmed it. And it's actually kind of like an interesting story in how you fix a movie, because the theatrical ending ended up being so much better than the original ending, but they have the original one there for you to see as well, how they first set it up, and then they're like, oh, well, this doesn't really work, so then they went back and retooled it, and it's so much better.
I mean, that's not really a common thing that happens for like home video releases of movies, because most of the time you get to see the director's cut ending or whatever, like it's like they fucked up my movie. It's very rare that you have a film that's like, here's the original ending that didn't work and we changed it and we made it better.
Right, exactly.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how Bigfooty is this movie really, though?
Like Bigfoot's in the movie for like probably 45 seconds. It's the point of the movie is Bigfoot.
I mean, that's what all those like shows are about, and that's really what a lot of Bigfoot movies are about. It's people trying to find the fucking thing.
Right, exactly. And sometimes you have to look in Ecuador, apparently.
the most un-Bigfoot place to
go. Like, I feel like the script writing meeting, they're just like, they thought that was funny, so they put it in. And that's kind of like what this movie feels like, is like just stuff they thought was funny, so they just decided to put it in the movie.
If you're from Ecuador, let us know on social media if you've seen a Bigfoot there. I'm just kind of curious if like that was really a thing, because like, obviously there's a lot of southern Bigfoots and then like Pacific Northwest Bigfoots, and then you have Yetis and things like that.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's, Florida's got the skunk ape, and Australia's got the yowie, and there's the Yeti in Tibet, like the Himalayas. But yeah, I don't know if we have a Maryland Bigfoot or not. I don't know if there's ever been a Maryland Bigfoot sighting, honestly.
No, I was gonna say we had our own Loch Ness Monster knockoff.
Right.
Chessie?
Yes. Well, if you're from the Baltimore area, you'll get some of these references. If you're not, you're just shit out of luck. But
right. Or should we have started this with ahoy crew member?
Fucking Captain Chesapeake. Ah, man, this is bringing back the memories. But there we go. That's all about. This is about reminiscing and a lot of stuff. It's about Bigfoot, but it's about the good days.
Right. Bigfoot makes you think. Bigfoot makes you think about the good old days.
Yeah, when it was just like you just eat a bag of Doritos and then get diarrhea and then stay home from school and watch Beetlejuice or something.
There you go. Exactly. Are you telling us? Is this your memory? Is this your personal memory here?
Yeah, man, it's all coming back.
I've never felt closer.
I know, man. I just feel like we're bonding right now, like we haven't in the last 25 years. So before we move on from Strange Wilderness, anything else you want to throw in about it, Bruce?
No.
Well, that's pretty. that's to the point. We're gonna take another commercial break here, but when we return, more Bigfoot, more Bruce Holecheck on the Cinematic Void podcast.
The sight of it will live with you or die with you, but you will never forget the shriek of the mutilated. The abominable snowman, the yeti, or is it? A scientific expedition that turns into a nightmare for all but a few, with the surprise ending of the year.
Sometimes it almost sounds like something human.
Have you seen it? You don't really believe we're gonna find anything out there.
Well, Dr. Prell thinks we might.
Oh, Prell's got a thing about snowmen. The trouble is that people believe that garbage of his can get themselves in trouble.
It's the damnedest thing, Ernst. If it isn't a yeti, I can't imagine what it could be.
I could see it as it was chewing the flesh of Tom's leg.
Honey, stop treating me like a child! Will you stop acting like one? Dr. Prowl brought you on this mission for a reason.
This is not for the weak. This is truly the shriek of the mutilated.
Welcome back. We've been squatch hunting with Bruce Holecheck here on the Cinematic Void podcast. And up next is his number 2 Bigfoot movie. And Bruce, why don't you enlighten us to what that is?
That would be Ryan Schifrin's 2006 movie, Abominable, which I think I saw for the first time with you, I believe.
Yeah, we did watch it.
Yeah, I think, when the Anchor Bay DVD came out, but we'll get into that in a little bit. If you haven't seen Abominable, basically the movie starts, we're introduced to a wheelchair-bound man and his kind of a dick male nurse, and they're heading back to a cottage in the woods where we eventually find out that the man previously lived with his wife before she died in a tragic rock climbing accident that also left him paralyzed from the waist down. It's worth noting the cliff they were climbing is actually nicknamed Suicide Rock, so one might think they actually got what they deserved, but whatever. Enter a jeep load of hot chicks partying next door for a bachelorette weekend, who soon find themselves hunted by a giant hairy beast. And the man spies all of this happening through his ever-present binoculars, but can he get anyone to believe him before it's too late? So there was this period around 2005 or so where Anchor Bay started moving from the vintage horror titles that were really their bread and butter for the 5 years or so before that, to incorporating some more recent direct-to-video fare. And while a lot of them were not so great, I'm looking specifically at Day of the Dead 2, Contagium, which is one of the worst goddamn things I've ever seen in my life. But there were a few solid surprises, and Abominable was one of them, was one of the best. Another good one was actually, do you remember this thing we saw called Dead and Breakfast?
Yeah.
So we actually saw Dead and Breakfast. We drove down to North Carolina to meet up with Leif Yonker to film some supplements for Darkness, back when his vampire, DIY Vampire Gore Fest Darkness was in production for Barrel Entertainment for the double disc DVD release. So we drove down because he had, was screening his new and improved quote unquote director's cut, or the vampire version, or whatever the hell it's called, at this film festival in North Carolina. But there was this massive ice storm that weekend. So nobody showed up. So basically we were just trapped in this hotel, as they were screening movies with 10 people there, who would come in for this film festival because nobody else could actually make it there because the ice was so bad. I mean, we were literally sliding down the sidewalks. Also, while we were in North Carolina, just for your knowledge, Nick, Jim said the funniest thing that we've ever heard Jim say in his entire life. So we were up late watching the news one night, and the weatherman on the news who was talking about this ice storm, we thought he fucking looked like Frank Stallone. So Jim, just out of nowhere, is just like, "This weather's breaking my balls." And for some reason, me and DeHaven thought that was like possibly the funniest thing Jim's ever said in his entire life.
It really is. And I think we were just out of our mind, because I remember that trip down there where you got like this hilarious speeding ticket in Virginia, which is the worst place you can get a speeding ticket. Like,
that was bad.
When that cop pulled us over, his hand was on the gun. He was ready. He's like, I think you asked him, how close are we to the North Carolina border? He's like, you'll get there if you go the speed limit or something like that.
Yeah, it was like, because in Virginia, it's like anything over 85 is like automatically reckless driving. So right, I had to like hire a lawyer from another state to represent me and all sorts of shit to try to get the reckless driving charge pulled from my license. For the record, that's not the first time that happened either. But whatever.
I mean, that was a weird weekend of whatever, because I think it was you, me, DeHaven, this guy Aaron Curtis that used to work on
Aaron Curtis. He's worked on some like real movies and shit, hasn't he?
He worked
like,
on
recently?
He worked on House of Cards. I think he moved to North Carolina or Georgia. I think it's Georgia, because that's where a big bunch of film production. So he does grip and electric work now. So he's staying busy.
Good.
He's come a long way from fucking running mini DV tapes at fucking screening of Leaf Yonkers Darkness.
Right. Standing up in the corner of an underattended theater due to an ice storm. So Leaf still gets in touch with me. He wants like copies of those tapes, and I've tried to explain to him that in order to get those tapes, I would have to go to your parents' house without you there and like hug your mom and shit. And I just don't feel like doing all that. So yeah, at some point when you're back in Maryland, you need to find those Darkness tapes for Leaf.
They should be in the drawer with all the other weird featurettes we did. I guess
know. The problem is I don't know if any of that stuff is labeled properly, and I have no idea how to like. I wouldn't even know how to watch those things to see what's on them. You know.
I mean, I remember we had those cheap Sony MIDI DV tapes, which were the worst ones. We didn't know at the time, but they had this problem with glitching. And I think I remember we were watching footage and there's like glitches and like all that kind of shit on there.
Oh, that's funny.
I mean, I know I think Arrow's putting it out. I guess is he doing a third version of Darkness at this point?
He is. He's doing, I guess, what he's calling like the final version now, where I think he's putting back in some of the music that he replaced for the vampire version. And then I don't know what else he's doing, but he wanted to incorporate some of our stuff in the documentary, kind of like make an extended version of the documentary, which we were going to do. Like I had this idea that I wanted to do like this sort of like Where Are They Now featurette, and like all the stuff we filmed with Leaf at the convention, take some of that stuff with him, and then also talk to people like Scooter McCrae and Howard Berger and like some of those guys that had made some of these independent films in the 90s, and like just talk about the trials they had and the success they had with those movies and how hard it was to get another one made and things like that. It could have made for a pretty cool piece, but yeah, another one that just kind of floated away
on the same raft with Raft Squad.
Yeah, exactly,
waving by. But I guess I don't know if you plan to sidetrack it at this point, but we should talk about it. Bruce and I used to do DVD. I guess some of them had ported over to Blu-ray, but we made some featurettes over the years.
Yeah.
I remember we did the one for Extra, which was a lot of fun, and that one was easy.
Yeah, more easy than some of them. It took us a little bit to kind of find our voice with these things. Most of the time we were just in there, I mean, because we were both working all day long, and then we'd come and we'd be all slap happy by the time we started like each night working on editing these featurettes, and basically we just started doing stuff that would make us laugh. So like I like to feel that they're a little bit rough around the edges, but I like to think they had personality.
The one I always have the most, it's a weird memory because it's a funny memory looking back. At the time, it was a fucking nightmare because we stayed up for like 24 hours to finish this damn thing. It was we did 2 featurettes for Caligula.
Right.
We did the John Steiner one, we did the Lori Wagner one, and like for some reason we kept slacking on the Lori Wagner one because she gave us that CD that she had put out of like sex songs or whatever it was called.
Well, and if you remember that Lori Wagner one, in the middle of the interview tape, we lost like 20 minutes of interview because the gardener hooked into. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Like the gardener hooked into the outlet or something, and it completely fried all the sound to the tape. So like the gardener goes by, he's like trimming some hedges or something, and like the sound is completely wrecked on the tape for like 20 minutes. So we lost like a giant chunk in the middle, and then she did like a wardrobe change in the middle. So we had so she was like in 2 different outfits during the thing. It was so weird.
I just remember like, and then my system started crashing at that point. I just remember one point, probably like 5 a.m. when I knew I had to go to work and be there at 6. I'm just like throwing the fucking computer chair around.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like we were trying to render something and it like froze or locked up or something. And yeah, you just had like a fucking meltdown. It was funny because, right, we'd work on these featurettes and we'd like every single night we'd just be dealing with each other and like trying to meet some of these deadlines and we never had like enough time, like no matter what. It was always like, oh, we need this on like Thursday. I'm like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, so like we wouldn't talk to each other for like 2 weeks afterwards, and then we'd like finally decide it was safe to hang out again.
They were fun times. I think it would always be like we always work where we had like a real pace, and then like it's like, well, they want it tomorrow.
Right.
Which I think happened on every one of them. After the extra one, we did the Don't Answer the Phone, which is probably got the longest legs out of them all, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, that's been on like 4 or 5 releases now.
A Nicholas Worth interview is worth it, damn it.
I know. I mean, it's I mean, I get this. The fact that he died probably helped us. But no, he was the coolest dude. He was really nice. And it's totally a bummer. I found out it was like my birthday actually when my buddy Art Edinger called me. I was like, oh man, I just heard Nicholas Worth died. And I was really bummed because like, he was like living in like an old folks home at the time. So like we had to go pick him up and like take him to the studio and stuff. And, we did the interview with him, and then like he didn't have a DVD player and he didn't have a computer. So he just didn't know. So I would call him like after the DVD came out and like read him the reviews, from like internet sites and stuff, just so he could, listen to him. And he was like so grateful and he was so happy that people like remembered him and for like, liked his performance and stuff like that. Do you still have like the, so when we edited the featurette, like for some reason he kept bringing up God, because he's like a born again Christian. So we cut all that stuff out, but Jim put together like this Jesus montage of Nicholas Worth, like every time he brought up God or Jesus while he's talking about this movie where like he's strangling naked women and like he's like thanking God.
It's probably still on my work computer down in the basement.
Oh my God, that was so funny. I remember just watching. I remember I just came over one day. You showed that to me. That just was fucking. I just fell out. It was so good. Yeah, hopefully you still have that somewhere.
We should have sent that to Joe and put it on the Vinegar.
Yeah, seriously, that would have been like the greatest Easter egg on that Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray.
I remember you used to have that voicemail from him for years where he's like, Bruce.
I know. I deleted it. Oh, I accidentally fucking erased it.
I remember it's like, Bruce, it's me, Nicholas Worth. I don't look like how I used to look like, or something like that.
Yeah, he's like, Bruce, this is Nicholas Worth. I was thinking about the interview and I'm old now. So if you think that's going to be a problem, let me know. They're just like, we know you're old now. Like, that's not a surprise. But yeah, he was the best. He popped up in something that me and DeHaven watched the other night. Oh, fuck, what was it? Whatever, it doesn't matter. I was gonna look it up, but who cares? But no, he's always great. It's always fun to see him pop up in something. And yeah, it's totally a bummer that he's not around anymore.
But that movie will live on. And it's funny now because at the time when that first DVD came out, it wasn't really on a lot of people's radar, but like since then, a lot of people know Don't Answer the Phone.
Right. It's a good one. It's a good movie. I probably count it still in my top 10 Vinegar Syndrome releases. And I definitely still count it in my top 20 slasher movies still. Even though some might argue it's not a slasher movie, but whatever. It's a slasher. Right.
It's also a nice, like, sleazy Hollywood movie. You get a nice shot of the Alien premiere at the Egyptian Theater in it.
I don't remember that. That's awesome.
Well, every time like it gets around we've talked about Egyptian theater stuff, I always pull up that clip because it's clearly a shot where they're like in a car driving by stealing shots, and it's just like Egyptian theater with the alien like marquee and like a line around the block. So
what's funny is not that long ago I rewatched Death Wish 2, and the movie almost feels like a complete spiritual like sequel, like they exist in like the same universe because the main cop is played by the same actor. It has like this really sleazy score, and it's totally like a gritty, like dirty LA story. So like with all those elements together, like I feel like you could merge those two movies together and make it like one long detective story with like two parallel things. But yeah, it was really interesting to me how close they kind of resembled each other. Watching Death Wish 2 again not that long ago.
I mean, just imagine a movie where Charles Bronson is hunting after Nicholas Worth.
Jesus Christ, wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, I have an editing system who says we can't make it now.
There you go.
But I guess back to Abominable, which
so back to Abominable. So I mean, Abominable. I mean, it's basically in case you remember the plot synopses from 45 minutes ago. Abominable. I mean, the directors admitted that it's basically Rear Window with a Bigfoot, but it really has a lot of fun with the concept. The monster itself is like really kind of funky looking, like it looks like kind of like a deranged homeless person, but it's huge, like it's really like bulky, and it just towers over the actors, and it gives it like more of a feel than just like a dude in a suit. Plus the film doesn't really hide the kills, which is a major plus. So it has the creature like ripping out throats and biting off faces and stomping people's guts out. And plus you get a supporting cast full of genre vets like Jeffrey Combs, Lance Henriksen, D. Wallace Stone. And one of the girls next door is played by Tiffany Shepis, and she's always welcome. I always like her. So director Ryan Schifrin is actually the son of legendary composer Lalo Schifrin, who did everything from the Mission Impossible theme song to Dirty Harry and Enter the Dragon, Cool Hand Luke, Amityville Horror.
I was going to say, this is our second tie to Clint Eastwood and Dirty Harry with Bigfoot movies, because Charles B. Pierce was one of the writers on Sudden Impact.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Yeah, good call. But yeah, for some reason, like I thought Ryan, when this movie came out, Ryan Schifrin was kind of part of that whole like new millennium horror crew with like Adam Green with Hatchet and Joe Lynch with like Wrong Turn 2 and Mike Mendez, Eli Roth, Neil Marshall. All those guys were sort of coming out with these pretty cool movies around the same time. But unfortunately, for some reason, Ryan Schifrin, I'm not sure what the story is, but he never was able to get a second feature going. I don't know if that was something he tried to pursue and just wasn't able to get it. He did some shorts, and he did one of the segments for that Tales of Halloween anthology that came out a few years ago, which is a movie I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, I was really kind of bummed that he's never quite gotten around to doing another feature, because based off Abominable, it seems like he can put together a pretty fun monster movie.
I mean, when you basically take Rear Window and put a Bigfoot in it, it's just imagine Jimmy Stewart going against a Bigfoot.
Those are some big feet. Did I nail it? Is that what Jimmy Stewart would sound like in a Bigfoot movie?
I'm gonna have to say no, but
well, at least I tried.
Yeah, it's better than what I could do. So I don't know. Nick, can you do a Jimmy Stewart?
I've got no Jimmy Stewart for you. No.
Never
been good at impressions.
Well, neither have I, but
that didn't stop Bruce.
Not known for my impressions.
All right. If you do one, Nick, I will do a Jimmy Stewart as well.
It's fucking Bigfoot.
I mean, that might have been worse than mine.
Cool. See? Told you.
I don't know how I can follow that. All right.
Sorry. Hey, that's a big foot over there, huh?
He's Edward G. Robinson.
I'm doing David Lynch meets.
You'll never make me alive, Bigfoot.
Hey, see?
What I see here is a Bigfoot.
That wasn't bad.
Well, I that's about all I could do if I went beyond that.
There we go.
It'd be like, yeah, see, it's Bigfoot. So somehow we evoked Jimmy Stewart impersonations, talked like 40 minutes about us making DVD featurettes. I think you bought Abominable.
I mean, we used to make our Best Buy runs like every Tuesday and grab, whatever came out. And that was one of the ones we were like, well, fuck, it's a Bigfoot movie. Like, maybe, who knows? Maybe this will be a good one. Because at the time, I mean, it had been a minute since there had been like a really quality Bigfoot movie. So yeah, I think we just rolled the dice on it, and yeah, it turned out to be a surprisingly decent watch.
I know we're going to go off topic here, but
okay,
let's talk about Best Buy and how it used to be the best place to buy movies and now is probably the worst place to buy movies.
Yeah, I haven't even been in one in probably like 2 years. But yeah, I mean, there was a period there where, I mean, there was so much stuff coming out. And it was literally every week, you know, you had to Best Buy to see what new Image DVDs were there, especially Anchor Bay stuff. You know, their shelves always had the newest Anchor Bay things. Weirdly, I can remember on 9/11 getting out of work early because, I don't know, something was going on. And like speeding to try to get to Best Buy, hoping that they'd still be open on 9/11 because Opera and Suspiria were coming out that day. And like I had already gotten Suspiria because they had that out early, but I didn't get Opera because they hadn't had that yet. But unfortunately, when I got to Best Buy, it was closed.
Well, there might have been a good reason.
That's my biggest memory of 9/11.
Just going to try to buy Anchor Bay's edition of Opera. I mean, it did come with a CD.
Or no, maybe I have it backwards. Maybe I bought Opera early and like they only had the single disc of Suspiria out early and they didn't have the 3-disc and I was waiting for the 3-disc. I think that's the actual story. It's been 20 years.
I mean, that was the thing about like Best Buy. Like they used to actually have a good music selection too. Like
right.
You know,
oh yeah, Best Buy was a good record store for a while. Not actually records, CDs, but it's a good store.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, right? Yeah, I used to always pick up like they would have like Victory Records end caps.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Yeah,
like, I remember specifically when Jawbreaker Dear You came out. There was a huge Dear You display.
Mm-hmm.
You know, crazy.
Right, and they weren't expensive. Like they're always having sales. You could pick up stuff for like $10 a pop, and yeah.
And now, if you walk into Best Buy, like I went to go buy, I had a keyboard stop working, and I was like, Best Buy has to have a keyboard. No, right. They don't have a fucking normal keyboard. It's like, I just want a regular ass keyboard. They don't fucking have that. So it's like, they have no movies. They have no music. The fuck's the point of Best Buy anymore?
Right. Refrigerators and TVs. Best Buy exists for warranty packages. That's probably their main like sale.
I was going to say, I did buy a TV for around Christmas time myself. So I guess they have good deals on TVs occasionally, but yeah, that's about it. Not like the heyday. So, any closing thoughts about Abominable before we move on?
No, you tell me.
I mean, it's fun. It's gory. If you haven't checked it out, I guess it's stuck on DVD. Like,
no. There's an awesome Blu-ray actually.
Really?
MVD put it out as part of the MVD Rewind collection. So yeah, and it's funny because they had edited the film on tape because I guess in 2005 they were just like whatever. But so in order to do this, they had to go back and rescan everything and recut the entire film, you know, using the original cut as a template. So yeah, they put a lot of work into actually producing this HD version. And then they had to like fix some CG, so they, you know, tweaked things a little bit. But it actually it looks good. I watched that in prep for this. I bought it when it came out like a few months back. Or a year back. I don't know. Time has no fucking meaning. I've been sitting here for 16 months. But yeah, it's great. It has a bunch of extras. It has the featurettes, a new introduction where he talks about the process of putting it all back together. It includes the old standard definition version if you're really a purist about that for some reason. But no, it's a nicely loaded special edition Blu-ray, and it's readily in print. So definitely, if it sounds like something interesting to you, definitely give it a look.
I was about to say, I was kind of wondering, like a lot of those Anchor Bay titles that like they put out, like the newer movies that they were producing at the time, like I guess a lot of them don't have homes, so that's why I thought, but I guess I did remember that MVD did put it out at some point.
Yeah, you're right. Like a lot of that stuff is, you know, the vintage titles are obviously mostly with licensors, but a lot of these more recent things that they kind of were the premieres of. Yeah, a lot of them, the Anchor Bay DVDs are kind of like all we've seen for them. So yeah, I'm happy that this one escaped into HD because it was one of the better ones. Now we need Dead and Breakfast.
Yeah, Dead and Breakfast is a good one. If you haven't checked it out, I guess I don't know if you can still buy Anchor Bay DVDs. Like they're just like stockpiled on like deep discount or like Amazon at this point. I don't know, but that's worth checking out too. But we're going to take another break, and when we return, we're going to have the #1 Bigfoot movie according to Bruce Holecheck here on the Cinematic Void podcast.
Monster Truck fans, this is the video you've been waiting for. This is Bigfoot, king of the monster truck. 60 minutes of non-stop monster truck action that will blow you away. It's all new, brand new. You'll see it all from car-crushing heroics to dangerous monster truck rollovers, heart-pounding wheel stands, monster truck drag racing, hill climb, music videos, and Bigfoot deep in the mud. Witness the first car crush ever and ride in the cab with Bigfoot as he pours on the power, plus much, much more. Nothing stops this giant muscle machine as he flies through the air, jumping cars and smashing everything in his way. This is the video that everyone's talking about. This is the ultimate in monster truck excitement. This is Bigfoot, king of the monster trucks. This offer not available in stores, so order yours today. Have your charge card ready and call now 1-800-848-9000 to get your copy of Bigfoot, king of the monster trucks for $24.95 plus shipping and handling. Call now and get a Bigfoot cap free. Offer not available in stores, so call now 1-800-848-9000. It's incredible.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Bigfoot with Bruce Holecheck here on the Cinematic Void podcast. And up next is his favorite Bigfoot movie. And I'm going to give a little spoiler. It's my favorite Bigfoot movie, too. And I think it's also Nick's. I know we kind of fucked up and revealed it earlier, but that's been leaked out, so you don't know what it is. Although if you know any of us, you probably know what it is.
Right. Or if you have good taste.
Yeah, you'll know what it is. So, Bruce, tell us, what is your number one Bigfoot movie?
Well, the big daddy of Bigfoot movies is indeed James Watson's 1980 feature, Night of the Demon, not to be confused with the earlier British movie of a similar title.
And not to be confused with Kevin Tenney's Night of the Demons, which has no Bigfoot in it.
Right. That movie hasn't held up nearly as well as I thought it would. I used to love Night of the Demons when, I was younger and it came out. But having recently rewatched it, yeah, it just didn't do it for me. It was also at an Exhumed show, and it was like movie number 10 in a series of 14. So I might have been a little fatigued at that point. But yeah, it didn't seem like it really kind of moved as much as I wanted it to.
It's fair. Sometimes you grow out of movies, and sometimes if you watch them at 4 a.m., they ain't going to work no matter what. That's why I always appreciated those those Exhumed all-nighters we used to go to, where they would put the fucking clunker in there. The only problem is you couldn't sleep through the clunker because you thought something was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny you bring that up, not to go off on another tangent. So I saw you watched Pupi Avati's Zader the other night.
Yeah.
Which is a movie that I stayed away from for a decade after finding out about its existence. Just because all the reviews that I ever read in Deep Red and stuff, they all just said, oh, it's a goreless bore and nothing happens. So I remember Exhumed played it at the Hoyts, that big multiplex that they were doing their shows at for a while that we used to always go up to on and how the hell did we even do that on Friday nights after working all week? Jesus Christ. Now I'm ready to go to bed by 10, and somehow we were staying up till 4 in the fucking morning watching Italian trash movies. But so I remember we went up for an Italian horror all-nighter, and that was one of the movies that was playing, under its US title of Revenge of the Dead, with a completely inappropriate ad campaign that showed the zombie crawling out this sewer grate. That nothing like that ever happens in the goddamn movie. So I was expecting to fall asleep to it because everything I had heard about it said it sucked and it's just boring and blah blah blah. So I'm like, well, I'll fall asleep for that and I'll wake back up for whatever the fifth movie was, Burial Ground.
It was Burial Ground.
Yeah, okay.
Because I've talked a lot about this screening because that was the setup. Yeah, because at that point we're just watching it really sleep deprived at that point and just I want to sleep, but I feel like something's going to happen in this movie.
Well, yeah, and that was the cool thing. First, the score was fantastic, which I wasn't expecting. And then I really got wrapped up into the plot. And then as I'm sitting there watching, I'm just like, this is actually a really good movie. I don't know why I waited so long to watch this. But that was the perfect way to see it for the first time, was on 35 millimeter, at a theater in the middle of the night. Yeah, I thought it was really effective, really creepy movie. So yeah, I just saw that you watched that again the other night. And I was like, oh yeah, that kind of brought back that memory.
Because I knew you were coming on, I was like, well, I've seen Burial Ground enough times, but I've had the Blu-ray on my shelf for a bit, so I was like, I'm just going to throw that on for a rewatch because it's I have fond memories of that movie. Granted, and it also helped set up Burial Ground to become one of my personal favorite in-theater experiences ever because we were out of our fucking minds when Burial Ground went on.
Right. Yeah, it's a shame you didn't live out here for like some of these 24-hour-thons, because yeah, every now and then they'll hit me with a movie that like wasn't on my radar or was on my radar, but I just underestimated it. And yes, this shit just goes nuts. Whatever. I guess you guys are having fun out there on the West Coast, bunch of traitors.
I mean, it's not bad out here. I mean, it's a little hot. It's a little hot right now, and sure, there's fires and earthquakes.
Right. Hey, you know.
When we'll eventually fall into the Pacific Ocean, but like, it's not bad.
It's looking great.
You know what's funny thing of Exhumed Films is like now, like when I book stuff for Cinematic Void, I book a lot of Harry's prints, and Harry's part of Exhumed Films. So it's funny that some of the same prints we watched like maybe probably 15 years ago at this point.
Longer. I mean, we started my first Exhumed show I think was like 97 or something. So I mean, we were definitely going there at like, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, we've been doing this shit for like 20 some years.
Dude, I sometimes forget how old I actually
I know.
am at this
I know,
point.
it's ridiculous. I know,
It's like,
we're all.
I mean, look at you now, man. Not that anyone can see the podcast, but Bruce has the best pandemic beard I've seen out of anyone who grew one.
Yeah, this is like 16 months of growth.
We've had a lot of guests, but none of them had a fucking beard like Bruce Holecheck.
I know, and yeah, I got to cut it soon, but I at least want to get that one day of work in.
And now we're going to talk about, you know, we're
going to talk about Night of the Demon.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's like, it's my favorite Bigfoot movie. And I think it's probably your favorite for the same reason, but why don't you tell us a little bit about Night of the Demon?
So Night of the Demon opens with a professor in a hospital bed, face wrapped in bandages, detailing to the police the horrible events that happened to him and his anthropology students. We then proceed to a flashback for the rest of the movie as the college gang head into the wilderness to investigate reports of a mysterious humanoid creature, as well as search for one of the girls' missing fathers. Anytime the pace begins to slow, we're treated to a flashback within the flashback, illustrating one of the most ridiculously gruesome encounters they've all heard about. A dude in a sleeping bag is swung around like a sack of potatoes before getting impaled on a tree branch. Two Girl Scouts are forced to stab each other to death with knives. A biker taking a piss has his cock ripped off. And that's just a few of the highlights. The kids hear about a woman named Crazy Wanda, who has a special connection to the creature, but along the way to her shack, they run afoul a deep woods Bigfoot cult. And it all leads to a slow-mo monster rampage that ranks amongst the best I've seen, complete with ripped out intestines being swung around like a pair of goddamn nunchucks. And then, of course, there's even a twist ending. Night of the Demon is the kind of movie where the title pops up over an image of a giant Sasquatch footprint being filled in with blood, leaking from the stump of a man whose arm was just graphically torn off. Obviously, it's pretty much the greatest movie ever made. I really dig its kind of vignette structure. It wasn't necessarily how it was originally conceived, but I think it's genius. You know, it allows them to kind of ramp up the body count without ever needing to bother with characterization. And it really ends up, to me, it's probably, I would consider it the goriest Bigfoot movie of them all, which is all we ever really want.
I believe this was a video nasty, which is how it became, how I found out about it, really.
Yeah, it was. I was gonna say, yeah, I first read about it in Chaz Balance Deep Red, where he kind of, you know, talked about how ridiculous and gory it was. I think it was a really short review. It was only like 2 or 3 sentences, but I'm pretty sure he did mention something about intestines being ripped out, and it got like a 7 on the gore score. So I'm like, whatever, I'll go with it. I actually think it's gorier than a 7, but whatever. But at the time, you know, the VHS tape of it, like my rental shops didn't have it. However, one day in Woolworths at Hartford Mall, they had a cheapo EP speed tape of it back in their electronics section for $2.88. You know, on Saturn Productions. They also, like, that's where I got my first copy of Toxic Spawn, which was a retitling of Luigi Cozzi's Alien Contamination. Jungle Holocaust, which was like a slightly letterbox print. It was cut, but it was still at least in somewhat of a better framing than the full frame Video City tape. Because at the time, it was impossible to find Jungle Holocaust in full scope. Like, there was no video release in the world that I know of that had it full scope uncut in English. But yeah, a whole shitload of like bad kung fu movies. Does anybody even know what the hell like a Woolworths is anymore?
Well,
like, do they even have department stores anymore? Like, I remember there was like Ames and Best, and like you used to go in there and like they had like basically like your mom could go in and buy a dress, and like you go back corner and like buy a gun.
Yeah, at Woolworth, there was kind of like a little diner attached. That was
Right,
like
yeah.
the Woolworth diner too. So we would always eat there and then shop. You know.
Right. You go get burgers and shakes, and then like fucking like steal some baseball cards.
I mean, that was the Hartford Mall experience. I can't remember what we talked about on the podcast. I did a Video Nasties episode of Screen Drafts where this was, I made sure this was one of my top Video Nasties because you can't really argue against a Bigfoot rips off someone's dick.
Right.
It's
fantastic.
So, but I know I talked at length about Woolworths on that because like I think we probably bought this the same day because we were just going through that bin.
Probably.
You're like, what should we get? And you're like, you need Night of the Demon.
Right. Kind of like, so there was a time that we went over to Eric Neal's house, and like we rode over to like Circuit City, and I remember they had a cheapo DVD of Roadhouse there, and I bought it, and you guys were all like making fun of me. You're like, oh, Patrick Swayze Roadhouse. I'm like, you guys don't fucking know. So then we went back to Eric's house, and I made you guys watch Roadhouse, and then afterwards we all drove back to Circuit City, and you guys all bought your own copies because the movie was so fucking fantastic, and nobody will believe me that it was awesome.
In my defense, when I was growing up, my mom watched a lot of Patrick Swayze movies, so I think I, for some reason, connected to Dirty Dancing. Not that Dirty Dancing's a bad movie; it's actually a good movie, but
yeah, I mean, it is atypical.
But the thing is, it's like once you see Patrick Swayze rip out someone's throat,
right?
There's no coming back. I remember when we screened a 35 millimeter print Roadhouse, and basically the whole introduction, I'm just like, stick around for the throat rip. So when the throat rip actually happened, it was a loud cheer.
That's funny.
And unfortunately, that 35 millimeter print doesn't exist anymore because one of those fancy delivery companies that ships prints destroyed it.
Oh my God, that sucks.
The amount of like, I don't want to name the company, but they have destroyed many prints to the point that there's no new prints of them anymore. They destroyed the last like good Invasion of the Body Snatchers print. They destroyed Roadhouse. I guess maybe they just hate Park Circus, who handles a lot of those MGM titles, which also is like United Artists and that kind of stuff.
It only costs like $2,000 to strike a new print. Like, why would the fuck wouldn't they just do that? I mean, you make that back in 10 rentals, you know?
Not for a film that was shot on film, because if you're scanning if it's a new movie and you're doing a digital out to film, it's $2,000. But if you're doing like a restoration, because like when the Cinematheque got their 2001 A Space Odyssey 70 millimeter print restruck, and it was off four removed from the actual camera negative. So it was like, I think it was an inner negative, like, or inner positive. I forget what it is. Like, there's a couple things you could step off of, but like because it was coming from a film source, it was a lot more expensive. But like,
interesting.
But newer films, people, for $2,000, if you make a film that's shot digitally and you digital out to like a film print, $2,000's a fucking steal.
Right.
But back to Night of the Demon. So on a scale to 1 to 10 on the Bigfoot scale. Oh, what were you gonna say, Bruce?
Well, I was gonna say, one of the most interesting things about the movie, I did bring up kind of like its structure. It's kind of flashbacks within flashbacks. Anytime something was flagging, anytime the pace was flagging, they'll just kind of shove in another like graphic scene. So the movie was actually originally shot as a PG, if you can imagine such a thing. They had one screening, and Joe Rubin from Vinegar Syndrome kind of filled me in on some of this information. They had one screening as the PG version, and they wanted to sell it to like somebody like Roger Corman or something, but nobody bought it. They couldn't sell the damn thing. So actually, producer Jim Ball, who had now these guys all came from a gay porn background. So these, they were, Jim Ball, Buddy Ball was, involved in the gay porn scene before this. But that, like a lot of these porn filmmakers, as time went on, horror movies started to become more profitable. So they just tried to, try their hand at a horror movie. But, with the PG horror movie, it wasn't selling. So Jim Ball, the producer and co-writer of the movie, came back, and he's actually the one responsible for all the gore scenes that were filmed at a later date to try to spice up the movie to make it sellable. And then they did end up selling it. As far as I know, the gored up version never had a real theatrical release. You'll find some ad mats out there for Night of the Demon, but that's actually like a retitling of a different movie. But yeah, they sold it to VC2, who was like kind of like the mainstream offshoot of the porn company VCX for VHS. And that's where, you know, it's kind of sat ever since. So yeah, the Code Red DVD was actually pulled from the old VC2 master. Although if this movie, which is the greatest Bigfoot movie of all time and possibly the greatest movie of all time, if this sounds like something you're interested in, I would recommend holding off, because, you know, a little birdie might have told me that something might be in the works.
Man, can't imagine what you're talking about.
No, I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Things happen in the universe, miraculous things, but we'll just leave it at that. But if you need to see it, it's out there. But like, and I, you know, even in its weird, shitty, like 1-inch tape master, which is, I think the quality of the VHS tape we had is about the same quality as the Code Red DVD.
Right.
Hey Jim, did you do this as a Cinemadness movie?
I did this
in the past year and a half.
Yeah, when I started doing Cinemadness movie screenings, like early on, and I had no idea what the fuck to show. And this is before like I kind of got it more legitimate, because I thought I was I thought I was going to do it for 4 weeks and never have to do it again.
Right. Yeah, we see how that turned out.
Yeah. Now this keep on going, but
stop the spread.
Stop the spread. I mean,
flatten the curve.
It was a fun idea to think I could do it like a online screening once a week, but like, no, it wasn't. But I mean, I'm glad people enjoyed it. But like, yeah, one of the movies I did early on, I think it was the 4th movie I ended up doing, was Night of the Demon. Okay. And a lot of people hadn't seen it. Right. So I, you know, say, just let them go in cold. No mention of dick ripping or whatever. But after that, I mean, people were just like, I can't believe this is a fucking movie. It's like, you can't believe it's the greatest movie.
There you go.
Ever.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
But yeah, it's a weird thing, because like not a lot of people. It also came late in that whole Bigfoot cycle too, because you got to think in the 70s.
Yeah, it was 80. It was 80. Yeah. I mean, it was shot earlier, obviously. I mean, I think the on-screen copyright notice is 79, but it was actually shot a bit before that. And, you know, because they finished the whole movie and then had to go back and reshoot a whole bunch of shit for it. Now, I guess it first came out in 80, but yeah, it's copyrighted 79, and I'm sure some bits were shot a few years before that.
It also had a different title originally too, didn't it?
Yeah, something like, it was like The Revenge of Bigfoot or something stupid like that. I think is what it was filmed under.
Because I think Night of the Demon, the title that came after it, was because Bigfoots were out of vogue. So they had to like, well, kids love demons, don't they? Or
right, right. Yeah.
No one can tell the difference between like a hairy like man ape or a demonic force.
Well, and it's funny because, you know, I talk about the monster in Abominable being real funky looking, but yeah, this has got one funky ass Bigfoot too.
It kind of looks like, I think I mentioned it when I did the Cinemadness movie episode. It looks like Chakra from maybe that's not the name, from Land of the Lost, like one of those.
It really does. Like the total missing link, right?
And I think the Bigfoot kind of changes appearance at one point, because I think it's like more, I think the reshot footage or the added footage, it's like more bulky and hairier and like kind of more bear-like than it's. And then when you see it up close at the end, where it's just like going balls to the wall, it's like it's a little bit of softer Bigfoot, I think.
Yeah, that climax is so fantastic. Like the whole thing's in goddamn slow-mo, for like just so you can appreciate the awesomeness that's happening. Like every frame of awesomeness.
So I hope everyone who hasn't seen any of these Bigfoot movies makes a point to check them out. And if they're not good versions of them out yet, push your local boutique labels, because I would love to see HD of all these, especially DEMONWARP and Night of the Demon. So anything else you want to say about Bigfoot before we close out here, Bruce?
No, just keep on stomping.
Keep on stomping. We're going to take one last commercial break, but when we return, it'll be Read, Watch, and Listen here on the Cinematic Void podcast.
Fire, Gary, unless someone's going to stay up and watch it.
Oh, yeah, Linda's going to stay up and watch it. It's part of her job.
What?
Well, I'm afraid after tonight, someone is going to have to stand guard. We're already in Bigfoot territory, where all those people were killed. Those horror stories you heard about in the forest, they're true. They're all true.
Welcome back. It's now time for on the Cinematic Void podcast, where we talk about all the things we've been reading, watching, and or listening to. And Bruce, since you're the guest, why don't you tell us what you've been reading, watching, and or listening to?
All right, so here's the issue. uh, when I was getting this together, I forgot that reading was part of it. So I can talk about some stuff I got recently to read.
That'll
even though
count.
I haven't necessarily started reading it yet. So I did get the New Bleeding Skull book, their tribute to 90s titles. So that looks good. I haven't read it yet. I got that Pulse publication post-nuke book that Severin Films had available during their sale after the world ends. A book, a nice hardback book, looks good, has a lot of cool pictures, dedicated to all sorts of post-nuke films, post-apocalyptic movies, and not just the Italian ones that you're normally familiar with. This one really kind of looks pretty thorough. But again, I haven't really read it, so I can't say if it's any good. I got the new issue of Fangoria in the mail. Cover story on Werewolves Within. Also some American Werewolf in London retrospective pieces. Have you guys seen Werewolves Within yet? I drove down to Charles to see that like 2 weeks ago, and I didn't realize that the mask mandate was still on in Baltimore City because it hadn't been out here in the county for a while. So I just like strolled in like a jerk, like without a mask on, and they're like, "Excuse me, sir, can you please put on a mask?" I'm like, "What?"
They didn't have masks to offer you though.
Well, I mean, I just walked back out to my car and got one. I didn't argue, but I just didn't know. I hadn't worn a mask in like months out here. They don't have plastic shields up or nothing anymore.
I mean, out here is kind of weird with it because like there's the CDC guideline and then there's the LA County guideline, which is kind of vague. And at this point, it's like, I just don't fucking know. If I go to Target, I'm wearing a mask.
Yeah. I mean, out here, it's just like everybody's just done with it. They're just like, whatever. So yeah, it's no mask, no distancing, no anything. I mean, we have really good really good percentages out here in the county, so it's been okay. Plus, I mean, I've been vaccinated since like February.
We actually did a premiere of Werewolf Within, and I think we did a virtual Q&A. Haven't seen it yet, but I've heard very good things.
I liked it. It's kind of lightweight, but it's pretty fun little whodunit. I like the cast. I thought the script was really good. A lot of the secondary characters, they give them like a lot of really funny throwaway lines that are sort of like muttered in the background, sort of like Cooties. Did you see Cooties?
I did see Cooties.
That had some of my favorite lines of all time, and including the one guy who, like, in the background, he's like, "They're gonna rip off your face like the monkey lady." I thought that was like the funniest thing. Like, it just struck me so funny. But Werewolves Within, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Doesn't quite stick the landing, and like I said, it's pretty lightweight for the most part. But I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun for a whodunit. We don't get enough whodunits these days.
No.
So yeah, that's the new issue. So I got the new issue of Fangoria, which apparently I'm still subscribed to. I subscribed once, and apparently it's like an evergreen subscription because they just keep charging me for it and sending me this fucking magazine. So yeah, so those are the things I have sitting around here that I recently got and haven't read yet. So some good watches that I picked out. I did watch Alex Chung's Cops and Robbers from 1979. It is a like Hong Kong new wave crime film. Shockingly good. It involves a criminal who steals a cop's gun and then goes on this like sort of like crime spree trying to kill all the police. And it really kind of like as this like he's like this sort of like cackling maniac with a gun, and it almost like devolves into a horror movie. Like towards the end, it gets like really frantic and really insane. So one of the things I like about these sort of like new wave Hong Kong films from that period, like the late 70s, early 80s, is that they're so like they have a completely different feel and they're so not stylized. Like once the John Woo stuff came in, like the really heroic bloodshed kind of became popular. It seems like the films have like a whole different feel than like a lot of these new wave titles do, like Cops and Robbers or Choi Hark's Dangerous Encounters of the First Kind or Hired Guns and stuff like that, Coolie Killer. So yeah, Cops and Robbers, very high recommendation. I've also been going through the Thin Man series from the 30s. I don't know if you guys watched those, but Warner Archives have put out a few on Blu-ray now. They're really cool. It's kind of like tail end of screwball comedies, but pre-film noir. So they're these kind of like really funny mysteries. I don't know if you guys have seen any of these, but it's William Powell, Myrna Loy, And yeah, William Powell is sort of like a retired detective who married rich. So Myrna Loy has a bunch of money, and basically they're just like fucking drunk the whole time. And they just sit around and talk shit to each other, but then they keep getting involved in like these murder mysteries and have to figure them out. And they're so much fun. The dialogue is like really snappy, it kind of comes from that sort of screwball aesthetic, but they add this mystery element to them. So yeah, I've only watched the first 3 so far, because only the first 3 have been on Blu-ray, but I've really been enjoying the hell out of them.
I've seen 4 of them because I think Warner put out a 4-pack at some point of those, and I really enjoy them. I also enjoyed Dashiell Hammond in general, who wrote The Thin Man, who also wrote the Maltese Falcon, but both are totally different. And if you're looking for a Christmas movie, The Thin Man will also meet that need as well.
There you go. Yeah. It's funny. I think out here at the Charles, which is Baltimore's art house theater, I think it was last New Year's Eve, they actually played the original Thin Man on 35 millimeter, but I didn't go see it. Well, actually, not this last New Year's Eve, the one before. I forgot we lost a year.
2020, that year that just didn't exist.
Right. Yeah. Jesus. But yeah, so yeah, I've really enjoyed making my way through those. And then so me and a buddy of mine and a buddy of yours, even though you haven't talked to him in 40 years. So we usually get together like once a week and do movie nights. And lately we've kind of been on like an 80s gang tear. So two of the more memorable ones have been 315, The Moment of Truth, and this really bonkers one called Street Soldiers. That's a VHS holdout. But I actually tracked down the Kung Fu instructor from the movie, and I wanted to try to get an interview with him, just because the movie is like possibly the greatest thing I ever saw. And actually, it was recommended to me by Sam Deegan, so I can't even take credit for finding it. But yeah, it was. I immediately, like when she told me about it, I bought the VHS of it, and it did not disappoint. And also, so we watched a Shaw Brothers movie that I was a little bit late on, because I remember people talking about it when The Hateful Eight came out. But there's a Shaw Brothers movie from 1972 called The Black Tavern that follows a pretty similar trajectory. Like it's snowy outside. There's a coach that pulls into this sort of like restaurant, and like all these different people kind of converge on this one location, and all of them kind of have their own secret motives, and you're not quite sure who's up to what and who's like trying to do what at this place. And the kung fu goes crazy. There's multiple decapitations, there's crazy bull whippings. It just goes really bonkers, and especially for 1972, it was really bloody and a lot more violent than we were expecting. So I mean, it like immediately jumped to like into my top 10 Shaw Brothers movies. So yes, so that's what I've been watching. Listening, I almost listen to like no new music. Like I just listen to like a lot of like prog rock and like soundtracks. And but there's a Facebook page called What Do You Know About Ska Punk? And they've been putting out this compilation series that's like, it's like MP3 CDs, and they're double disc sets, and it's literally hundreds of bands, hundreds of currently active ska bands.
Wow.
And, right, like who would have thought?
Well, so, I mean it's definitely just due to the cyclic nature of life. Like ska is coming. Exactly. It's fucking due. It's overdue. Really, whether we like it or not, that shit's coming back.
Damn straight.
It's the 90s again. Like literally, like right. If you look at Generation Z fashion, it's all 90s shit. So why wouldn't ska come back?
Right. Now, I mean, I'm not saying all the bands on there are good. Like most of them are garbage and like unlistenable. So you definitely skip through a lot of the tracks. But every now and then there's been a few
just like the 90s.
Right, just like the 90s, right. But yeah, every now and then you'll stumble upon one where you're like, wow, this is actually like really fucking good.
Right on.
So yeah, as far as soundtracks go, that movie that Mondo Macabro put out, The Slave? It's sort of like a erotica kind of thing. So Nathaniel Thompson from Mondo Digital talked me into buying the soundtrack CD to that, and it's this double disc set, and it's absolutely amazing. A ton of music made for the movie that wasn't used in the movie, but it's this really good jazzy score, and that's been like fantastic. And then the other thing, so me and DeHaven watched The Boys Next Door recently, that like spree killing movie with Max Caulfield and Charlie Sheen. Yeah, that Severin put that out on Blu-ray. So we had it sitting around and hadn't watched it, so we decided to give it a go during one of our movie nights. And number one, the movie was fantastic. Directed by Penelope Spheris, and she's always great at picking amazing music. So there was one song in there that we were like listening to it, and we're like, who the fuck is this? And both of us were like completely convinced it was Alice Cooper. But I'm like, this isn't any Alice Cooper song I know. But then it turns out, so we did a thing, checked it on my phone to see, let listen and tell me who was who. I would say the name of the service that I used, but that would bring it up on my phone and scroll up on my notes, which actually happened to me. I was pronouncing some Chinese name when I was doing the Untold Story commentary, and it launched that app in the middle of me recording the goddamn commentary. So yeah, so if you listen to the audio commentary I did on the Untold Story Blu-ray that Unearthed Films put out, you might notice that there's like a bit towards the end where it just goes dead for like a minute because we had to cut it all out because it was just like total fucking chaos. So that wasn't censorship; that was just a technology malfunction. Anyway, so the song ended up not being by Alice Cooper. It's actually it was a collaboration from Iggy Pop and James Williamson. And they did like this whole CD together that apparently, like, I guess it was recorded back then, but like didn't come out for like years later or something. One of the songs from it is in whatever that movie was.
Boys Next Door.
Next Door. And it was a really, really cool song. So yeah, I got the full CD and I've been listening to that a lot lately. It's not quite Alice Cooper, but what is?
Nick, what have you been reading, watching, and or listening to?
All right, let's start with read. I've been reading Thomas Ligotti's The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. He is typically a fiction, more of a horror fiction writer, but he just wrote this philosophical book about how basically the human race doesn't need to be here. We don't deserve to be here. We will whatever. Like, it's basically just a bleak book about like fuck everything. It's just, but yeah, that's what I'm reading.
Which Unearthed film are you going to tell us about this week?
I'll get there. I'll get there. But so I just rewatched for probably the third or fourth time this year Kieslowski's Blue.
Okay.
Which, if you don't know, it's Juliette Binoche, and she plays a widow, and her husband was a conductor, and he was making this important piece, and he died before it came out, before it's finished. And so she kind of like Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain style. They did, people say like Kurt lived through this, maybe she wrote his compositions, but so just one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's just a beautiful French art film from the 90s, 93, I think. And really, if you haven't seen this, like, please fucking check out the entire trilogy, the three colors, blue, white, and red, by Krzysztof Kieslowski. Beautiful stuff. I also just watched
and currently half price at Barnes and Noble. Well, actually, I don't know when this is going to air, but
it's going to air just as the Barnes and Noble half price on Criterion sale is coming to an end. So.
Gotcha.
But absolutely. So grab that for sure. Criterion. I also just watched The 12 Chairs, Mel Brooks, his film before Blazing Saddles, which I was actually unaware of until quite recently. And it's fucking hilarious. Russian folktale style, kind of like Woody Allen's Love and Death or something like that. Mel Brooks' character in particular is just like perfectly just like the idiot. It's just, he's great. Highly recommended. It'll be playing at the Arrow in Santa Monica on the 29th. So check that out if you're in the area.
The day this podcast comes out.
Oh, is that okay? So yeah, hurry to the Arrow Theater. I just listened to this NPR podcast where it was just John Waters talking about how he wished he directed Solo. So that pretty good. Although it's only like 15 minutes long. I wish it was an hour longer because that man could gush about Pasolini. So it's very cool, but it should have been much longer. It's a fucking podcast. Joe Rogan does 4-hour podcasts every day. Do a 4-hour podcast of John Waters talking about fucking Salo. Come on, guys.
I could listen to John Waters talk about anything.
Yeah, really.
You know, I've seen him a couple times live, and yeah, he's always hysterical. So yeah, I'd be fully on board. I even buy, like, whenever he does new books, I buy audio tape versions of it just so I can listen to him say it, you know?
Hell yeah. Right on. So then that led me to watch Pink Flamingos the other night. You know, classic, but I actually haven't seen it since the 90s. So it hit super hard. Did Divine really eat that shit at the end?
Yes.
Yes.
Fuck yes. Fucking respect. Respect to Divine. I just saw The Jerk at the Arrow in Santa Monica. I picked up that print from Universal a few weeks ago, 35 millimeter. The fucking Jerk, guys. Carl Reiner. It was awesome. The writer, one of the writers of the film, Mike Elias. I think that's his name. Let's roll with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's not gonna listen.
Yeah, right. I think that's it, Mike Elias. But he showed up and he came in. He went up and did an intro, just like kind of on the spot. And he said that when he had driven by and saw the marquee that said The Jerk, he texted Steve Martin and said, "The Arrow's showing The Jerk tonight." And Steve Martin said, "Yikes." So fucking awesome. It's great to see it with the crowd. Fucking hilarious. You know, one of the greatest comedies of all time, in my opinion. And then, you know, after Pink Flamingos, I had to then watch Salo.
Of course.
Let's fucking go.
keep the shit eating going.
That's it. So yeah, I watched that last night, and it's you know, since I've been on the string of watching all these unearthed films, Salo is, I mean, it's an art film in general, and it's beautiful. It's poetry. But yes, they're eating shit and biscuits with nails in them, and fucking they're on leashes, and it's fucking insane. But if you have the tolerance for that sort of thing, it's highly recommended. And kind of like what I was getting at was, it's kind of not as crazy as it's maybe its reputation now. You know, like this many years later, people have done such crazy shit, you know? So it's like,
right.
Yeah, you know, its reputation is it deserves it, but at the same time, just watch the fucking film. It's not that crazy. Like just watch it. It's fucking great.
My first copy of Salo was when Reptilian Records decided to start renting videos. Like they had bought out like some local other rental stores inventory, and Chris X started renting out tapes from Reptilian Records, which, if you're not from the Baltimore area, the Reptilian Records was this giant punk rock record store that had been there like since I was a kid, and it was the place to go if you wanted to buy punk rock shit. So they started renting out like a bunch of weird videos. So essentially I would bring down Chris X dupes of Hong Kong action movies, because he really liked, you know, a lot of the Hong Kong action stuff. So I would just make him copies of like whatever new Hong Kong action movies I got in, and he would let me take whatever I wanted for rent. So that's like where I got my first copy, my first bootlegs of like Dario Argento's Uncut Tenebrae and Phenomena. I remember I got Sweet Movie there, Salo, Nathan Schiff's Long Island Cannibal Massacre, like all this shit. But the Hodorowski movies, like he had this fucking print of Holy Mountain that like the sound was out of sync by like 3 seconds. So like everything was off, and it just got worse as the movie went on. But the bootleg of Salo that they had, actually it was like it was struck from an actual film print. So it actually had the leaders to it, like in between all the reel changes. It would have the countdowns, like so you'd be watching this movie, then, you know, every 20 minutes or whatever, you'd have a countdown from 10 into it. But yeah, that was actually how I first saw Salo.
Wow. And then lastly, although I didn't finish it, but Bruce and I did talk about it earlier, so I have to mention it. I started watching, and this is in reference to Jim. It's not an unearthed film, but I believe it's distributed by them. Is this film called Trauma by Lucio A. Rojas. And I kind of only saw the beginning, and then not anything to do with the film, but I fell asleep. It was fucking late. But the film opens with they basically force this kid who's maybe in his early 20s or something. They bring him into this room and they force him to fuck his mom. And then while he's fucking his mom, they blow his mom's brains out and then force him to keep fucking her. But they've injected him with this thing. And so that it basically kind of like, you know, it's insinuating that whatever they injected him with like is making him do it, you know.
Mhm.
And so then he's just like going crazy fucking his mom while she's like had her brains blown out. Fucking awesome. Great start to a film. So I will watch the rest, but you know, that's my unearthed film for the week.
So I had heard that was an extreme one. I didn't know any of that, but I bought the fucking Blu-ray because Artsploitation put it out on Blu-ray. So I bought the Blu-ray back in March off of Amazon, and it still has yet to ship. They still, like, this whole time they're like, "Oh, we're trying to get this for you." I'm like, "Really? How hard are you trying, Amazon? Come on." But yeah, so I'm writing I picked it up because I heard it was nasty, and it's, you know, I'm writing a book that will be in the scope of. So yeah, I wanted to include it, but if I can't get it, then maybe not.
I believe it's known as the Chilean Serbian film.
Right. I was going to say it sounds like on that level, right?
Yeah.
I remember. So we did a movie night with Serbian film. I remember it was me, DeHaven, and this girl I was dating at the time. And like after the movie was over, like none of us were like even like wanting to talk to each other. We were all just like, like everybody was just moping around. We're just like, oh.
It's fucking great. I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
As far as listen goes, last night I went to a jazz club called the Baked Potato and saw a band called the M Squad, and they played 50s and 60s like jazz, TV, and movie themes. So they did like all the James Bond themes. They did a bunch of like the Lalo Schifrin themes,
right? To bring it full circle.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, it was great. Baked Potato is owned by Don Randy, who played piano on God Only Knows by the Beach Boys on Pet Sounds, which is fucking super cool. Also, Nick Menza, who was in Megadeth, who played drums on Rust in Peace,
right?
And you know, a few others, but like that one in particular because that's my favorite.
Exactly.
He died playing drums in this room. He had a heart attack while he was playing this in 2016. He was playing for some jazz band. Yeah. But yeah, went there last night. Fucking awesome experience. I can't wait to go back. So yeah, shout out Baked Potato. I went with Eduardo. Yeah, so that's one of the things I've been listening to, the M Squad. Also Fressa di Ferro, Bury Me Standing. It's like a I guess they call it like folk, folk, whatever, folk industrial, folk goth, whatever. I actually deleted the more folky, like Renaissance fair songs off of it. And so the rest of it's just weird, like sound collage, fucked up electronics. And it's fucking incredible. Also been listening to just more Atrax Morgue, Wound Fucker, Sickness Report, like all that shit is just fucked up and nasty.
Right.
And I love it. And also today, for some reason, I was feeling ultra 90s since we were all hanging out today. So I listened to Bad Religion, No Control. Although that maybe came out in the 80s, but it was my record in the 90s, you know?
Right.
And yeah, I guess it's about it for me.
Yeah, I can't help but notice you didn't listen to any ska. I didn't hear any ska in there.
Yeah, I don't know. Not vibing on it lately.
By lately, you mean 25 years.
Exactly. I tried to listen to Suicide Machines maybe a few months ago or something. I was just still like, no, we'll leave that in the past.
That's funny.
I guess for my rewatch and listen, I got my copy of After the World's End as well. I think I read a couple pages, but I've basically been thumbing through and seeing all the pretty pictures of post-nuke films from obviously Mad Max and all the Italian stuff. And also has an interview with Steve Jeanette, who wrote and directed Miracle Mile. So that was kind of surprising that that's in there too.
A solid 10 movie if ever there was one.
It is. It's another great LA movie. So that's my read. Watch. I've been working through the Televised Terror Volume 1 from Vinegar Syndrome. So Are You in the House Alone? Calendar Girl Murders and Child of the Night. The last two has Tom Skerritt in it. The last one has Elijah Woods, and I think his first role or one of his really earliest roles, and also has Darren McGavin returning to Seattle after being in the Night Strangler, the second Kolchak Night Stalker TV movie.
Right.
And I also watched Zetter, or is it Zeter, or how do you actually say it, Bruce?
I pronounce it Zeter, but I might be totally mispronouncing it. That's just how I look. Back when we were learning about this shit, nobody was saying it, so we had to just kind of guess how these things were pronounced. So like if I learned it the wrong way, then that's just the way I'm stuck with it. But yeah, I always pronounce it Zader, but I have no idea if that's right. Like I could look it up, but I'm not going to.
Nah, it's fine.
I can't even remember. They probably say it in the fucking movie itself, but I don't remember.
But yeah, I guess because I knew you were coming on, and like I hadn't watched this in forever, so it's like it's a nice slow burner. I wouldn't say it's really a zombie movie. It's kind of like it's a slow burn version of Pet Sematary in a way, except there's no Pet Sematary.
Yeah, actually, I remember that. Right.
But there's some eerie similarities to it. So if you like slow burns, if you like Italian zombie movies, and you like kind of art horror, they'll be up your alley. Also been watching the last season of Good Girls with my wife, Morgan. She got me into this show, and surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, they just announced they're canceling the show without doing the 5th season. So there's going to be no closure to this.
Right.
Which is always fun to know about TV show, but like the show's pretty good. It's really entertaining. Listen wise, I've listened to the new Dark Throne Eternal Hails, a band that my wife just introduced me to, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this name right. I think it's Winter Falleth. It's spelled winter and then it's Fylleth. They're like I think they're a UK kind of like black metal, melodic metal type band. It's a record from 2016 called "A Dark Hereafter," and the other thing I thrown on was Dark Funeral: The Secret of the Black Arts for some gnarly, noisy black metal. So
I like my black metal a lot less true and cult. I like the sissier black metal with like full of synthesizers and like forest instruments. So yes, a lot of pagan metal, a lot of Viking metal.
I mean, you might like Winter Falls because it's kind of goes that way. It's not as like it's not Dark Throne or like Vaughn or any like the lo-fi end of the spectrum. But
yeah, I hate that stuff.
But you love ska.
I was gonna say I'm the complete opposite of what people who like real black metal are.
You're basically
you
hot
don't care
topic.
about some like
Yeah, I'm totally hot topic black metal.
That wraps up this episode of the Cinematic Void podcast. Bruce, where can people find you online if they want to follow your adventures in movie watching?
I'm on all of social media. Just look for Cinema Arcana. And if you can't figure out how to spell it, then I don't want you to follow me.
Fair point.
Respect.
Until next time, see you in the void.